Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Tyrion, what have you done? The question was not asked by Jon Snow and Robb Stark as they led the way to the Maiden Vault with the dwarf, his companions, and angry Northmen. It was not asked by Ser Shamie, who grimaced when he saw his brother dragged, bound by both hands, to the highest floor of the keep. The man behind the question was big, portly, and broad-shouldered, with short, balding blonde hair and a close-cropped yellow that covered his massive jaw. He had the fair skin and green eyes of his family, but would never be described as handsome. Kevan Lannister was a steady, sensible man, and exuded a sense of authority and duty over the other prisoners in the tower, even the Kingslayer. "He did that, sir," Jon said, pointing to the chaotic scene unfolding in front of the captives. The dead Mormon man was still out in the hall, his purple tongue hanging out of a face frozen in a rictus of fear. Near the fire, Maester Veman wrapped bandages about Pulis's blood-stained head. The second Mormon guard was still unconscious and might never wake up. Daisy and Lyra glared at Tyrion as they hovered over Jari Mormon, who rubbed her bruised neck. The culprits had been herded in the corner by the two dire wolves. The Red Cloak Killer moaned, crying over his now useless arms. The severed forefingers of the left hand lying outside, Grey Wind snarled at the other three, teeth bared and ready to spring, while Ghost watched in silence, jaw and face flecked with blood. In another corner, Robb's personal guard stood over Tyrion and his cronies. Men from every house in the north and most of the Riverlands had volunteered, but Robb only allowed the Karstark brothers and the Small Joan to accompany the Winterfell house guards. Harry and Karstark and Small Joan Umber dragged Bronn and a cursing Valar up the stairs by their legs. They had not been gentle. Catelyn Stark came to offer comfort to House Mormont, although Jon thought Lady Maid cared only about action and not words. The Blackfish left the River Run guards on the lower floors of the keep to represent Lord Hoster and House Tully in the room. "Now tell me everything about this plot," Robb said. Tyrion and his men stuck to a stubborn silence, but there was no honor among thieves. The tall blonde mummer spoke first. "Milord, they found us near Harroway. We were paid to free Ser Jaime Lannister. Rosiern is a strangler. He was to kill the top guards with his bare hands. And then Manfred would pick the locks." "There are 4 of you. What were the other roles?" Jon asked. The man winced slightly. "Dabber is a poisoner. He had some powdered greycap to put into the food the servants were delivering from the Great Hall. That might make some guards sick and cause some confusion. And I am a Mummer Lister, they call me. I was to replace Ser Jaime in the prison, and he would escape in my clothes." Lister or Lester was not very original in his choice of names. Besides the height, the man looked nothing like Ser Jaime. His hair was sandy blonde, not curly locks of beaten gold. He was not broad or strong and lacked the piercing green eyes and the cruel smile that cut like a knife. "You look nothing like the Kingslayer," Robb said skeptically. "I just needed to play the role for a few hours. If the guards didn't discover me that night, I would have sneaked out the next morning, maybe as a servant," Lister said. "It was a bold plan. House Tully had been generous with ale and wine tonight. The guards would not be relieved until later, and any missing men might be thought to have overindulged." "Who hired you for this?" Jon asked. "That man Seir," the mummer pointed at the dark-haired sellsword. "And that boy, I saw him lurking about in the tavern. That would be the Squire Podrick Payne." "Did you ever see the dwarf? Or any other Lannisters?" Jon asked. "No, sir. Great men like that would never consort with ourselves. We were just given a job and told when to do it," Lister said. "They have never even met me, Snow. You can't show that I was involved," Tyrion said. "I doubt your sworn sword would pay gold and silver from his purse to free your brother. Bronn, right? Tell me who gave you the coin to buy these men." Jon said. The thin black-haired man kept his mouth shut. He was not insolent, but stared straight ahead. "He is the man who killed Sorvardis in a trial by combat at the Eyrie." "He is a skilled fighter," Catelyn Stark said. "We are not planning a duel. If you don't talk, it will go hard for you," Robb said. Bronn snorted and remained silent. Emir Karstark stepped up, ready to pummel the man. Jon held up his hand. "Wait. So Tyrion Lannister has bought your loyalty. What did he promise you? More gold than anyone else? A small keep in the Westerlands?" He is just loyal and honest. I am sure the Starks have men like that. Tyrion japed. You Lannisters think because of your gold that you can kill and rob with impunity. How much are being paid? Jon said. Tyrion says he will pay me double what anyone else will, no matter how much they offer, Bronn said. Jon shrugged. Well, I would be foolish to compete with Lannister gold, but there are other things that men value, Jon. Yes, Maester, the youngest Mormont said with a slight rasp. Had Ghost been a few minutes late, her windpipe would have been crushed. Jon pointed to Bronn. Cut off his cock. The dark-haired girl grinned and picked up the morning star, the wicked spikes glinting under torchlight. You can't do this. This isn't honorable. Tyrion cried in shock, and there were gasps from both the Northmen and the prisoners. The other two Mormont girls joined their sister, and Harrion and Eddard Karstark held Bronn's arms behind his back. Stark, how can you let this happen? Tyrion appealing to Robb. Be quiet, Lannister. My brother is in charge of prisoners, Robb said coldly. Lyra pulled down Bronn's breeches and Jory lifted the morning star to strike. Wait, Jory, if you use a full blow, you might break his legs, and then we will have to carry him down the stairs. Just use the spike on top. Push it straight through his cock, Daisy said. Just as Jory switched her grip to thrust the tip of the holy water sprinkler down, the sellsword broke. Stop. It was Tyrion. He gave me the gold. I found the men in the Lannister camps. A strangler, a poisoner, a mummer, and a thief. Tyrion told me that the escape would happen tonight, Bronn said. Looks like your man pissed himself as well. I guess Lannister gold doesn't always win, Jon said while Jory put down her weapon and Lyra tossed a dirty blanket to the sworn sword with disgust. Bring the squire over. The small Jon grabbed him by his neck. Podrick Payne was a skinny boy with short black hair. Jon guessed that he was 10 and 3, but his chubby face made him look even younger. That and his tears of fear. Please, sir, tell me what you know, Jon said. I didn't know the plot, but I delivered some pouches of coin from Lord Tyrion, and I carried messages back and forth. The last one was before the feast. I didn't read it, Ciri, Podrick said. To these men? Jon asked, pointing to the four. The squire nodded. I believe my brother has proved your involvement. Impep. Add those lies to your crimes. Robb said, I didn't lie. I merely thought that my involvement could not be proven. There is a subtle difference, Tyrion said. Tyrion, be quiet. Do not make this any worse, Yame said. The Lion of Lannister tried to look calm, but Jon could detect his obvious concern for his brother. Master Snow, what should we do with the rest of the scum? Harrion Karstark asked. We have heard what they have to say, and these four killed a guard, and wounded another badly. We don't need them as prisoners. Just cut their heads off and mount them on spikes outside the castle, Jon said. Lister cried out, Please, my lord, spare us. Rosianna's a murderer. We are just liars and thieves. Please, let us take the black or serve you. Jon stared at the whimpering man. What can you give me alive that I cannot take from you, dead? I have a secret, my lord. I can share it with you. Jon nodded for the mummer to continue. It was not Bronn who found us, but a camp follower, Shae. She is the dwarf's mistress. Tyrion Lannister as a whore. Why would I care? Jon asked. Because I have seen her go to other tents, my lord. She has been reporting to Tyrion's father, the old lion. I have seen her with him, Lister said. So, Tywin spies on his son through the whore. Did he know about this plot? Jon asked. I don't know, me lord, but Shae knew all of us, in the past, and I know she saw Lord Tywin to tell him things. Lister said. Jon looked at the dwarf's reddening face and thought for a moment. You thought you devised a clever plot to trick the Starks. Mummers and murderers, worthy of a bard's song, but your father knew about it. If you succeed, Tywin would have Sarkame back without any payment. But if you fail, what did he care? It was your own stupidity. Of course. Vylar knew. After all, you replaced 4 Lannister guards with criminals. I am sure he told Tywin as well. You can't prove that, Snow. I do not know what my father knew or did not know, and neither do you, Tyrion said. I can certainly find out what Vylar knows. He served your family in King's Landing, and will have tales about Sir Jaime and your sister. Your father is happy to let you take all the risk, and he takes all the reward. His servants dirties their hands like the mountain, while he claims no knowledge. Clever for him, not so much for you, Jon said. Jon, where will you put the prisoners? They killed our men. The sentence for that should be death, Robb said. Execute the murderer and the other two. The mummer has given us a secret to save his life. As for Targaryen and his men, how many crows' cages do we have? Jon asked. These were iron cages hung from a scaffold where outlaws were placed on display until they died of exposure or starvation. Often they would go mad before they died. Riverrun has 3 of them, Snow, the Blackfish said. Put these 4 into them. Bronn and the squire can share 1. Let the visitors to the tourney see them in cages and know what happens if you break guest right, Jon said. I have seen gibbets before. The stench is awful. It attracts flies and they can survive for weeks. The Blackfish wrinkled his nose. Not without water. The Citadel claims that a man cannot live without water for more than 4 days. We will see if that is true for dwarves, Jon said. You are being foolish, Snow. I am still a Lannister. I am worth more alive than dead. And my father may despise me. He may spy on me, but he will also avenge me, Tyrion said as guards forced him to his feet. You ordered the death of our men. You had to kill the guards to free Ser Jaime, Jon said. That is the way of war, boy. Small folk die, while highborn are held for ransom. Aegon built this wheel 300 years ago. It will never change. The dwarf said calmly as he trudged away. Jon ignored the attention of the servants as they arranged platters of tarts and sweetmeats throughout the large and crowded solar. The maids were too frightened to gaze at him directly, but they stole glances from the side. Unlike the assembled lords, the small folk paid no attention to Robb's tale of Lannister treachery at the Maiden Vault. They must already know, Jon thought, marveling at the speed of gossip at Riverrun. Jon took several tarts stuffed with chopped nuts, fruit, and cheese, and a flaky crust still warm from the oven. The Tully cooks might overdo the trout, but their fruit tarts, drizzled with honey and spices, were delectable. In the excitement, Jon had missed the banquet, and he filched several tarts while Robb spoke. And that is why we imprisoned Tyrion Lannister for breaking guest right. We have captured his crew of thieves, and 3 of his men have confessed to the plot. Robb finished to a rapt audience of Northmen and Riverlords and ladies. It is an astonishing tale, one that will be told many times over. But Galbert Glover hesitated. How did you know of the death? We were in the Great Hall when the attack happened. The eyes in the room swiveled to Jon. He was fortunate that he had already finished the last blueberry tart. Robb responded for his brother. My brother alerted me to the plot this morning. Jon suspected the Impy of treachery and uncovered one of his spies. We alerted the Riverrun and Winterfell guards. We were not certain if the attack would unfold tonight, but took precautions. Robb patted his chest, and the shocked lords heard the ring of his fist on the mail shirt. Jon smiled wryly. He wondered how the puppeteers would embellish this story. A pale plain man stood, his eyes strange and colorless like 2 white moons. He wore a spotted pink woolen cloak embroidered with droplets of blood. Lord Stark, what will be done with Tyrion Lannister? Surely you do not plan to hang him in a gibbet, Roose Bolton said in a whisper. The dwarf is guilty. His sword hired the men. His squire paid them, Robb said. In the north we hold the laws of hospitality sacred. Yet you executed 3 men already. This strangler broke guest right by killing the guardsmen. But Lord Tyrion did not attack anyone. Calmer heads should prevail in judging him, Rosierd. A man who plots a murder is as guilty as the one who swings the sword, Jon said. For most men, that may be true. But Tyrion is a Lannister. We know who the true threat is. Joffrey Baratheon may sit on the Iron Throne, but it is Tywin Lannister who rules. He is a king without a crown, and he will not forget the killing of his son, even if he is a dwarf, Rosierd. Are you saying we should pardon the imp even if he is guilty? The Great Jon shouted. The Lord of the Dreadfort remained calm. If Tyrion Lannister dies in a cage, there will be no peace between the North and the Westerlands, while your houses live. Who will speak with the old lion? How will you negotiate for Lord Stark's freedom? Rosier, Lord Bolton's words are wise. We want to negotiate a truce, not continue this war. If we must trade 4 Lannisters for 2 Starks, then we should thank the 7 for that bargain, Lady Catelyn said. I would be happy to speak to Lord Tywin. A peaceful land has always been my desire. Rosiad. And what of the crime committed? Am I to do nothing when my bannermen are slain by deceit? Robb said. Lord Bolton's pale eyes looked as empty of emotion as ever. It was impossible to tell whether the Leech Lord was joyful or enraged. You have executed 3 men and imprisoned 4 others. And if this sellsword or squire dies, no one will care. A short, gray-haired woman stepped forward and raised her hand. Lady Mormont did not have her morning star, but the crowd stayed silent. My lords, my daughter Jarell was attacked tonight and nearly strangled to death. The White Wolf saved her. Had she died, nothing would stay my vengeance. But she is alive, and the killer is dead. I do not know or care about the plots of the Lions. Whatever Lord Rabe should decide, House Mormont accepts. We have kept faith with House Stark for 1,000 years. That will not change today. I thank you for your loyalty, Lady Mormont, but the gods curse those who bring murder to their guests or to their hosts, Robb said. A dwarf is cursed already. We came south to save Lord Stark. If we need to trade such a monster back to the Lions, then we should do so. Rickard Karstark said, I will decide Tyrion Lannister's fate, and I will decide who carries our offer back to Tywin Lannister. I have heard your concerns, my lords, Rhodes said. He stood up to end any debate. Lady Stark and Edmure Tully moved to speak with Robb, and Jon knew that his brother would be thronged late into the evening. The tarts were gone, but Jon asked for a small supper, a bowl of cold fish stew, and biscuits to be brought to his chambers. The servant girl nodded her head and rushed to the kitchen. Before he rested, Jon checked 3 areas. The dungeons housing 1,000 prisoners still, the keep with the Wester lords, and outside, where Tyrion, Bronn, Podrick, and Vanlar shivered in their cages. The guards were vigilant everywhere, a combination of Mormonts and other men from Winterfell and Riverrun. The House of the She-Bear had turned out in force, their anger over the attack turning into a grim determination that no prisoner would escape. Jon dreamed that he was Ghost, running through the woods in the shadow of a monstrous castle with 5 great towers connected by stone bridges. The scorched marks and slagged stone could still be seen, cracks formed by the immense heat of Baelarian's fire when the great dragon roasted Harren and his sons alive. The White Wolf did not care for ruins and went instead to the Great Lake, the water the color of gray steel under moonlight. Jon knew that Ghost was in the keep nearby, but in the dream, the dire wolf roamed through the landscape of rolling hills, winding streams, burnt fields, and empty holdfasts, searching and sniffing the air for his lost sister. She was here at the God's Eye. Jon had only seen Nymeria in Ghost dreams. She had dark golden eyes and gray fur, although under moonlight, near the lake, her underbelly might look white as snow. Nymeria was not as silent as Ghost, nor as swift as Grey Wind, but she was wild and fierce, as brave as any of her littermates. Braver, Jon thought. She was a lone wolf away from the pack. He would find her and bring her home, wherever she was. More wolf dreams? The voice came from a man all dressed in red and smoke. His steel vambraces and gauntlets matched the deep red of his steel conical helmet and were darker than the tabard and the cloak. On his chest, there was a great swooping white dragon, and Jon thought it curious that the royal family had never protested Bloodraven's sigil. And again, the white dragon only had 1 head and not 3. I was searching for... Jon started. Your little sister. Do not worry. Brendan Rivers chuckled. That one is hard to kill. You will see her again. But this is not a time for wolf girls. Come and meet a dragon. Jon patted the dire wolf's head. Ghost wanted to continue the search. But even if Arya and Nymeria were at the God's Eye, Lannister forces separated the sister from her brothers. A reunion was not safe until they defeated Tywin and drove him from Harroway. Lead on. They walked through shadows until they came to the front of a massive square fortress with a dry moat lined with a bed of iron spikes and a drawbridge spanning the moat. Megid's Holdfast boasted walls 12 feet thick and a Kingsguard at the bridge, but the keep had fallen several times. The last to Gregory Clegane and Amory Lorch when they murdered Princess Elia, Egan, and Rhaenys. On that day, the Kingsguard had been Jaime Lannister, and he had failed to defend the royal children, a far greater crime in Jon's mind than killing a mad king. They passed into a sparse room, one of the few not decorated with rich tapestries or paintings. On the wall, there hung several large shields, bearing a 3-headed red dragon. A tall boy with broad shoulders and long flowing silver blonde hair stood in side profile, his sword thrusting and slicing but only at vulnerable points of an armored training dummy. In less than a minute, the long sword stabbed and sliced through the eye and the mouth slits of the visor, the joint of the neck, both armpits and the wrists. Jon had seen duels in the practice yards, and the Kingslayer at the Whispering Wood. They were all slow compared to this fighter, whose blade seemed a lightning-quick extension of his long and well-muscled arms. The boy turned warily to Jon, but he pointed the blade downwards. At the library of the Citadel, Jon had seen pictures of Aegon I with a gold and ruby circlet in his silver-gold hair, armored in black scale mail and carrying Blackfire. This boy looked as noble as the Conqueror, and the Valyrian blood manifested in the deep purple eyes and the long silver-gold hair. He was clean-shaven and young, certainly younger than Jon, but Jon had no doubt that he was far more deadly with the blade than many full-grown men. The boy looked every inch a warrior, and a Targaryen prince to boot. "You do not look like a Dornish spy." "I am not, Jon Snow, your grace," he said, with a small bow. The boy snorted and scrutinized Jon carefully. "I did not know my father had bastards from the north. I thought he was too lazy to go further than the Riverlands." "I am not your father's bastard, but I am a bastard," Jon said. "Then why are you here in Macor's Keep? Have you come to enter the tourney?" he asked. "Tourney?" Jon asked. "For a spy, you are poorly informed. Today, there will be a tourney for squires. It is to honor the birth of my youngest half-sister, Shiera. A poor jape, given her mother died in childbirth. But then my father was never known for his sensitivity. Shiera Seastar, Bloodraven's lover, and in her time known as the most beautiful woman in the Seven Kingdoms, and one of the most dangerous. She had many half-brothers, including Brynden Rivers, but one stood above the rest. Then you must be." Jon realized Daemon Waters. The boy sheathed his sword. Daemon was a bastard and would be for another 2 years. But on his name day at the age of 12, Daemon Waters won a tourney in King's Landing, defeating boys 4 or 5 years his elder. For that, he was acknowledged and knighted by the king and given the sword, Blackfire. History had decreed him as a rebel and usurper, and yet Jon could see why men had followed him in battle. Even at 10 and 2, he was a dragon. Bloodraven was nowhere to be seen. Jon was alone with Daemon, but he was not yet a Blackfire. Maester Yandel considered him the wonder and terror of his age, but the Citadel was prone to gross exaggeration. Daemon was skilled with the sword and quite handsome, but not some inhuman monster born to betrayal. He was just a boy. "How do they treat bastards in the north?" Daemon asked curiously. "Probably the same as they treat them here, as a stain on their honor," Jon said. "Today is your name day, is it not? And you are here by yourself without your family." "How do you know that?" Daemon said. "I was ignored on my 12th name day, not treated with scorn, but just forgotten. And then my father sent me away," Jon said. Purple eyes met gray ones, as Daemon grabbed a blunted sword. "Care for a spar?" Even if he had trained for the last 4 years at Winterfell, Jon would have been outclassed. But this was the Black Dragon, and he could not help being curious. "I would be honored." Daemon attacked with a lazy insouciance, probing Jon's defenses. The strikes were quick and effortless, and left no openings. Jon feinted an attack, but then pulled back quickly to guard. He barely had any time before Daemon unleashed a furious barrage that forced Jon to give ground even as he parried the blows. The Black Dragon, sensing weakness, began to rain blow after blow down until Jon almost fell to his knees. Daemon was young, but he was strong and tall, and blessed with a tremendous reach. Jon turned and twisted away, hoping to create space. The dragon pursued, and then Jon, using his blade only for defense, lashed at Daemon's legs with a kick. His right foot swept out, but met only air, as Daemon leaped effortlessly, coming down perfectly balanced. There was no hope of victory matching blows with Daemon. He ran to the side, and Daemon, slightly puzzled, followed cautiously. With his left hand, Jon picked up a chair, using it as a crude shield and opting to wield his long sword awkwardly with one hand. Daemon struck again, his slices carving 2 of the chair legs off, and raised his long sword once more to attack. At that moment, Jon threw the chair at Daemon, then took the long sword with both hands and thrust forward, hoping to land a blow in the chest or shoulder. With almost inhuman speed, the Black Dragon caught the chair with his right hand, spun to the side, and smashed the chair downwards on Jon's sword, and in the same motion thrust the sword with his left hand at the body. Jon said, the tip near his right shoulder and neck, looking ruefully at the dented blade on the ground. Daemon placed his blade down, breathing hard. Do all Northmen fight like you, with trickery? I don't know, and I am a bastard, so I am well versed in tricks, Jon said. Daemon laughed. It was a merry sound like Robb after he had played a prank on Sansa and Arya. I do not think I will face chairs in today's tourney. You fight well, but you need more practice in the yard. He offered Jon a goblet of water. I never had a chance, even with the chair, Jon said as he drank the water. I grew up in the Red Keep all my life. I was never allowed to leave. Even though my father refused to recognize me, ever since I could hold a sword, I have trained hours and hours each day with the best fighters in the Seven Kingdoms, Daemon said. After this tourney, what do you wish to do? Jon asked. Leave this shithole of a city. I could be a sellsword in Essos, head a company with my brothers Brynden and Aegor, the great bastards. Daemon joked with a bittersweet smile. What of your family? Do they not have plans for you? Jon asked. My father is a whoremonger ruled by his lusts. My mother died before I could remember, and my brother, Daeron, says he will provide for me and give me an allowance. An allowance. Daemon struck the great steel shield of Maegor the Cruel with his right fist. Daeron proclaims himself, my liege lord. I am the blood of the dragon. I do not need his favors. Does Prince Daeron treat you poorly? Jon asked. Daemon's eyes narrowed with anger. He is all kindness and dignity. But his courtiers whisper against me, and mock me as a bastard and my mother as a whore. She should have been queen. I hate the fucking Dornish. The Daena Targaryen was a queen, but she was forced into the Maiden Vault by Baelor, the Blessed. The small folk in the faith loved the Zealot King, but Baelor was a terrible ruler who could have easily destroyed the Seven Kingdoms. The Septons claimed that Daena the Defiant was wanton and willful, but how many men would appreciate their cock locked up for a decade? Aegon III had 3 daughters, and they were all discarded to protect a befuddled fanatic. The faith was fortunate that Daemon Blackfyre was not a dragon rider. He would have burnt down the Great Sept with its marble walls and crystal towers. Pardon, I do not wish to whine. There is little I can do about the past. Just train at war, Daemon said. He took up his sword again. I know what it is to be a bastard, to have a brother garbed in fine clothes while I wear ringmail, to see him praised when I am ignored. I have eaten at the low table on my name day. I never knew my mother, but I have heard my good mother wonder if she was a whore, Jon said. Daemon nodded. I must prepare for the tourney. My brothers want a squire for me. Squire for a squire, he laughed. Farewell, Jon Snow. Perhaps one day we will spar again. Brynden Rivers reappeared when the Black Dragon left. He looked at his half-brother's back as Daemon walked away, and Jon thought he saw a flicker of regret in the one red eye. Then again, the Bloodraven was in the shadows, and it was difficult to read that cunning face. Why did you bring me here? What was the purpose of meeting Daemon Blackfyre? Jon said. He was still Waters then. He was a better man before the sword. The best brother you could imagine, Bloodraven said. Enough hints and winks. What was the point of this? Bloodraven, why am I here? Jon said. The hand of 2 Targaryen kings ignored the outburst. An old, bitter man gave him a sword and the arc of his life changed. Without Blackfyre, the seeds of the rebellion would have never happened. Daemon might have lived for a long time, and ascended to the throne naturally. Half the Targaryens died in the Great Spring Sickness. The sword was no blessing, it was a curse, Bloodraven said. But what does this have to do with me? I have no Valyrian sword to give or half-brothers to battle, Jon said. Brynden Rivers smiled, as if he hid a secret. You have to make decisions. Even the smallest ones may affect many things to come, and the way of kings is different. They do not follow the laws of the Seven, or the old gods, or even guest right. You are talking of Tyrion Lannister, that I should ignore his crimes, Jon said. What is more important to you, justice or mercy, honor or victory? Brynden said. Why must I choose? Can a man not be both good and strong? Jon asked. You must have read too much drivel on good King Jaehaerys. All of us have to make choices, and they are not as easy as the Maesters and Septons claim. Decide wisely. There are many would-be kings in Westeros, and their choices will determine the fate of your family. I would sacrifice honor, mercy, and justice to save them, Jon said. You may have to, but do not forget. Sometimes the cost is greater than the prize, and victory brings only regret, Bloodraven said, and then Jon woke up. As he walked to the Tully Solar, the various sets of guards reported. There had been no disturbances last night, but many curious eyes on Tyrion and his cohorts, Sir Daven, and the other Lannister guardsmen still grumbled. But when confronted with Podrick and Bronn's testimony accepted the imprisonment. Of course, the dozens of Mormont guards certainly helped. In the dungeons, Westermen clamored to be set free and offered higher ransoms. If the imp could be stuffed into a crow's cage, then the war could last a very long time. Jon walked through the door of the Solar to see his brother perusing a scroll. A plate of newly fried fish and a mug of dark ale were also on the table. Jon was glad to see that there was a fork, and Robb was not placing greasy fingerprints on one of the few scrolls in the library that he had not read. The parchment was old, dating back to the reign of Aerys I, and Jon was curious what had piqued Robb's interest. "Morning, Jon. I am sorry we could not speak last night. My lady mother had much to say. She is concerned about Lord Stark and Sansa. She believes we must come to terms, and wishes that we had never captured the imp," Robb said. "Does she think we should have let him escape? After Jorah Mormont nearly died," Jon asked sharply. "I do not know. She is sick with worry. But what do you think? Is there any chance to rescue father without dealing with Tywin Lannister?" Robb said. Jon shook his head. "No, King's Landing is over 400 miles away, and there are enemy forces every step of the way. There are thousands of red cloaks at the capital, loyal to Cersei and Joffrey, and father is held in the black cells. Lady Stark thinks that, if Tyrion is imprisoned or slain, only our most powerful lords should be sent to treat with Tywin. Otherwise, he will refuse to meet our men. Lord Bolton greatly desires the honor, and my mother thinks it unwise to refuse him," Robb said. "What do you think of Lord Bolton?" Jon asked. Robb shuddered. "The man scares me. He is so cold, and I remember the stories of old Nan about the Boltons hanging the skins of their enemies at the Dreadfort." "Then why would we trust him with such a mission? The Boltons have risen up against House Stark many times," Jon said. "Do you have any suggestions? My mother fears that father and Sansa are being mistreated," Robb grimaced. Jon understood the fears. Prisoners who came from Casterly Rock confirmed that the new king easily lost his temper and could turn from gallantry to cruelty in the blink of an eye. "Not yet, but I dreamed of something last night." Robb raised his eyes. "What, Jon?" "Ghost was tracking Nymeria near the God's Eye. He caught her scent. I believe that is where she is, near Harrenhal." Jon said. "Arya or her wolf?" Robb asked. "Both. They are alive." "I am sure of it," Jon said. There is no point telling Robb of the Bloodraven or the encounter with Daemon Blackfyre. Robb frowned. "Getting Arya from Harrenhal will be difficult. The scum of the Lannister army garrison that castle, the bloody mummers and the Mountain's men. I have spoken to Lady Wend. The castle may be ruined, but the defenses are still formidable. We might lose 5 men for every one of theirs if we try to storm Harrenhal." He didn't need to say that the North did not have enough men to spare. Even with the Rivermen, Robb's forces were still outnumbered by the Lannister army. They sat in silence. Jon could see his brother's strain in the dark circles under his eyes and his pursed lips. The candle on the desk had burnt down to a stub. His brother must have been reading late. "Robb, what is the scroll about?" "This is the tale of a Lord Hayford who traveled west to fight Dagon Greyjoy. It talks about how he rescued Lydia Lydon from the Iron Isles and brought her home, where they married. I had no idea you were into such tales of adventure and chivalry." Jon said. "I am not." Robb unrolled the scroll. There was a map of the Westerlands that Robb had marked with a quill, east of Casterly Rock, but south of the Golden Tooth. Lord Hayford talks much about his travels on the Gold Road. There is a spot here east of the Deep Den, where the road rises and commands the high ground for 20 miles. It is the perfect place for an ambush. I could build a strong defensive position there and attack the Lannister army with surprise. How would you lure their army so far west? Tywin would leave Rizrin at his rear if he marched there, Jon asked. By attacking the Westerlands. If we burn the fields, he would have to chase. Rose said. Why? The strength of the Westerlands is not near the Deep Den, but on the coast. The peasants will suffer, but not the nobles. The Westermen castles are near the sea to defend against Ironborn raiders. You would have to send forces far west to the Crag and Ashermark. Those are strong fortresses. They could hold out for months. Jon said. The Son thinks that if we seem ready to attack Casterly Rock, Tywin must retaliate. He says if we threaten to kill both Jaime and Tyrion, that the Castellan of the Rock might surrender to save the future heirs, Robb said. Jon shook his head. Those are Ironborn tactics. If Balon Greyjoy appeared outside Winterfell, holding Bran and Rickon captive, what would our Lord Father do to such a threat? Would he surrender our home? He would pray for their souls and swear an oath to kill every Greyjoy he could find, Robb said. Why would Tywin Lannister be any different? The Rock might fall to treachery, but dragging the Kingslayer and the Imp to Casterly Rock would be a mummer's farce. And what would happen to our sister and our father? Threats only matter if they can be carried out. If we kill our prized captives, do you think Tywin Lannister and the Iron Throne will not retaliate? Jon said. You are right. But if we do not trade prisoners, then we must battle. And I do not want fight Tywin Lannister on his terms. In the shadow of Harrenhal, with his sell swords, manning catapults. I want him to come to us, where we can prepare the ground in our favor, Robb said. I agree, but for now, the best path would be to trade prisoners. And if that fails, then we must prepare to lure Tywin out, Jon said. But what do we do about Tyrion? We can't trade him if he is a corpse. Though we can't forget that he violated guest right, Robb said. No decision will be perfect. Let me think on this for a day, Jon said. Robb nodded. Thank you, brother. I must go attend this tourney and congratulate the victors. But whatever counsel you give, I will take. Perhaps one of the Mormont sisters will win the tourney and crown you the king of love and beauty, Jon quipped. He laughed at the open panic on Robb's face. The large black-feathered bird swooped to a perch above the viewing stand, blending in with the silver trout on the red and blue canopy. The raven looked down as the Tullys took their seats for the first combat of the second day. Thousands watched as Jason Mallister, in purple and silver armed with a shield and sword, faced Harris Harlaw in black plate, mail wielding Nightfall. The winged eagles of Seaguard repelled the squids 10 years ago in a bitter, bloody battle, and neither side had forgotten. Jon ignored the clash of battle and turned to the crowd. He marveled at the sight and hearing of the raven. The bird's sharp eyes could see the grooves on a wreath worn by a Gardener King on a coin that Garland Terrell bet against Lord Goodbrook. He could hear not just the yammering of Northmen betting, but the whispers of hot-blooded swains chasing after the daughters of riverlords. He saw pickpockets roaming through crowd and men in dark cloaks hiding in the shadows. Jon wondered how many other spies were hidden in the crowd. He had spotted the obvious ones, Tyrion Lannister, Garland Terrell, and Harlaw men. But Jon knew there were others on the pay of the Lions or the Spider in King's Landing. Were they hidden in the puppeteers, merchants, or the small folk, or were they in plain sight knights and men-at-arms, who had secret allegiances to other kingdoms? There was too much to take in, too many sights and sounds, too many enemies to watch. The senses of the raven did not feel as natural as his wolf dreams. As ghost, smell, and taste became stronger and richer and Jon felt more alive and free. The raven did not reject him, but the experience was strange and alien, as if every moment reduced his humanity and made him only a pair of eyes staring into the crowd. Was this how Brendan Rivers felt? He was rumored to be a sorcerer, who could see through the eyes of beasts in the woods and birds in the skies. Jon gritted his teeth. Bloodraven served as hand for 20-plus years. Had he used ravens as spies for those 2 decades? So many eyes and so many spies. It was no surprise then that men with secrets feared Bloodraven. Jon heard a hesitant knock on the door. The castle was thinly manned, and unlike Robb, he had no squires. There were soldiers nearby, but their orders were to monitor the prisoners and watch for strangers in the castle. Even the River Run and Winterfell guards were distracted by the second day of the tourney. Come. Yasha walked into the room, hunched over like an elderly drudge. The gray shawl hid not only her dark, lustrous hair, but much of her face, and she was dressed once again in drab browns and faded yellow. She straightened and unwrapped the shawl, revealing a troubled face. "My lord, I have come to ask you for a request." Once again, Jon tried to gauge her true age. When they met, she had seemed well past her prime. Easily over 40, at the puppet show, he guessed her to be 30. And that she had been barely a woman grown when she traveled with the Mummers troupe. But now, Axia looked even younger, her pale blue eyes hesitant, and her voice shaky. She was afraid. "Milord, I have come to beg for mercy for one of your prisoners." She bowed her head deferentially. "I know it is not my place, but..." Jon stopped her with a hand. It is Tyrion, isn't it? He was your lover. Asia looked startled, but then went on bravely. Asia, did you know, me lord? Jon shook his head. I thought it was a Lannister, but I would not have guessed him. Tyrion is only 26. He could not be more than 10 and 4 when you were lovers. He was 13, my lord. I was 10 and 4. We were married by a drunken septon in a barnyard with pigs as witnesses. Aisha said. But the Lannisters treated you badly. Why would you wish to save him? Yaxa stared down at the floor, her voice only a whisper. They told him I was a whore. His father had me raped by dozens of guardsmen. They held me down and took turns. And Tyrion was the last, and paid a gold dragon when the others threw silver stags at the floor. Jon nodded. A man who ordered 2 children butchered would not blink at brutally separating his son from a low-born lover. Again, I ask, why would you save him? He is Gerion's father, and for those 2 weeks, our love was sweet. He was gentle and good to me. When he knew I wished to be a healer, he bought me books to read. I don't want to see him die, me lord, she said, a tear forming on the inside of the right eye. Do any of the Lannisters know about your child? Jon asked. She shook her head. I rested for 2 days from my injuries. Tyrion never looked for me. I fled Lannisport and went east. I know this is a hard thing to ask, but are you certain that Gerion is his child? Jon asked. Yaxa spoke in a steady voice. Others may doubt, but I am sure. Gerion's lips and smile are his. My boy is smart, quick, and kind. He is Tyrion's son. All those things could be a mother's desire that her child was not a bastard or product of rape, but Jon did not doubt that Axa believed what she said. I am sorry for what you have suffered, but Tyrion's fate will be determined by the needs of the North and the crime he committed. You should not be surprised by the attempt. He loves his brother. Jaime told him that I was a whore that he had bought for him. I am certain his father ordered Jaime to do so. Yes. Jon sighed. He was a bastard and banished from Winterfell, but his family life was far happier. Ned Stark was a man of honor, and Lady Stark, despite her scorn, would never stoop to such a vile act. For all their wealth, it seemed like shit to be a Lannister. Jon's thoughts were interrupted when a golden-haired boy rushed into the room. Mother, you are okay, the boy said. Yaxaw embraced her son. Jerry, whatever is the matter? Tyrion stopped to catch his breath. We saw them, those Scunners who attacked us. They were sneaking into Riverrun. I was worried they would hurt you. Who did you see, Jerry? Jon asked. That Ramsay fellow and the other bandits, Chet and Satin, saw them walking over the West Bridge 10 minutes ago, Jerry said. The tourney was in full swing, with melee battles in front of thousands of cheering spectators. The fields outside offered food, drink, gambling, and even whores. Why would Ramsay and his cronies miss such excitement? There was no prize in the castle worth their attention, nothing new except for Tyrion Lannister, and Jon immediately realized what Ramsay was plotting. The Raven whirled back over the castle walls, even as Jon urged Ghost to rush down from the keep. A few loyal Winterfell men followed Jon, unsure as to exactly what was transpiring. Jerry, Chet, and Satin were also there, and he urged them to pick up spare weaponry from the forge. They came upon a half of a dozen men, sour-faced and mean-looking. One carried a greased whip, and many had long hunting knives. They wore the furs of the North, but no signia over their brown garb. Ramsay was almost at Tyrion Lannister's cage. Halt! What are you doing here? Jon called out. An ugly man with broken teeth carrying a short sword turned. We are Mormon men just looking in on the captives. That was an obvious lie. None of the men wore plate mail. In the past few weeks, the forge had produced long swords, maces, and spear blades, not knives for skinning and gutting game or poorly made short swords. You lie, get away from the prisoners. Jon raised the steel shield and brought the long sword up to strike. The Raven perched on top of iron bars, and the Winterfell guards fanned out. Ramsay Dustin swung up a cocked crossbow. At first, Jon thought he was aiming at the Raven, but then he realized the target was the prisoner in the cage. Tyrion Lannister. The Raven flew at Ramsay's face, and the ugly, pale man shot the bolt too high, bouncing it off the bars of the cage. Before he could load again, Jerry, holding a shield with both hands, barreled into him, knocking him over. Half of the bastard's boy ran for cover, dragging Ramsay with them. The rest drew their weapons and attacked. Ghost killed 2, and a Winterfell guard stabbed the last one. Tyrion got up from his crouch and peered at the bloody scene below. Snow, did you just save my life? Bronn and Podrick looked on as well, although the two had been bystanders and not in immediate danger. Jon thought it likely that Ramsay would have killed any witnesses to cover his tracks. You should thank the boy. He saved your life, Jon said, offering a hand to Jerry. The guard was doubled on the crow cages outside and the bodies quickly removed. Jon dispatched Chet with a message for Robb at the tourney grounds, but the meeting did not happen until after the melee ended. 4 fighters remained, Dacy Mormont and Small John Umber from the north, and Sarah Harris Harlaw and Sarah Davin Lannister. Finally, Robb made his way to the Solar, accompanied by the Blackfish and Lady Stark. He ordered the door closed behind him, and only Ghost and Grey Wind remained in the room as guards. What in the Seven Kingdoms happened, Jon? Robb asked. We killed 3 men who were sneaking around near Tyrion Lannister's cage. I think they are Bolton men, but there is no proof. They wore no insignia, Jon said. Bolton men? What were they doing? Were they freeing the imp? The Blackfish asked. No, I believe they were trying to kill him. Lady Stark and her uncle exchanged looks of shock, while Robb remained thoughtful. But why would they do that? Catelyn asked. I understand, Robb said. If Tyrion died under Mormont guard, the Lannisters would think we ordered his murder. They would never forgive our house, and if the Iron Throne won the war, they would make House Bolton wardens of the North. But we cannot be certain it was on Lord Bolton's order, Lady Stark said. 6 men came while the tourney was going on, armed with knives and crossbows. Their leader Ramsay shot a bolt at Tyrion. 3 of them escaped. Yes, we do not know whether it was ordered by House Bolton, but who benefits? Who said that Tyrion's death will mean no peace between the North and the throne? Jon said. Clever. Lord Bolton is heard saying Tyrion should be spared to seek peace. And then he kills the imp and House Lannister blames us. Rosiad. There is no proof, Robb. You cannot accuse a great lord without evidence, Catelyn said. Trust is earned, and right now Lord Bolton has none of mine. I know I cannot arrest him. Jon, what should we do with the imp? Robb said. If the Boltons want him dead, then we should surprise them. As the Blackfish says, in war, never give the enemy their wish, Jon said. That evening, an entire battalion of guards marched Tyrion Lannister to the Maiden Vault. Not only was the dwarf freed, but Bronn, Podrick Payne, and Vylar were released from the cages as well. The 3 were put in chains and left near the door, heavily guarded. Tyrion limped as he trudged slowly up the stairs. Still, it was a considerable improvement over the gibbet. On the table there were pitchers of water and ale, platters of hard-boiled eggs and cold chicken were next to dishes of fresh brown bread. Jaime and Kaven Lannister were already seated and guards were posted outside. Ghost and Grey Wind had already started dinner, devouring 2 whole chickens and looking for more. No wine, I am parched, Tyrion said, smirking at the rolled eyes of his uncle and brother. You are an impudent fellow, Robb said, half annoyed and half amused. Guilty. My father would say that I have been impudent since birth, and I don't mean to change before I die. Although I guess that you do not mean to kill me. If you did, you would not release me, or bring me to see my family. Kevin poured a mug of old water and handed it to the dwarf. Lord Stark, I would ask you to spare Tyrion's life. His plot was foolish, but he did so to free his brother. Peace is preferable to war. My brother would be greatly angered if one of his children were slain. We do not care if Taxley is angered, but we do wish our Lord Father to be returned. And for that, we are willing to make a deal, Rhodes said. Despite your plot, we are willing to free you. But for 2 things. First, you must confess in the Great Hall that you broke guest right. And second, you will tell Tywin Lannister that Ned Stark should be freed and return as Lord of Winterfell, Jon said. And does your change of mind have something to do with the attempt this morning? Who were those men you killed? Tyrion asked after he gulped down his glass. They were men who wished you dead, Jon said. I thought you felt the same last night, bastard, Tyrion smiled. Jon shrugged. You know the story of the rat cook. The gods punish oath-breakers even if we do not. We wish our father returned to us as Lord of House Stark. I do not know if I can do that, Tyrion began, ignoring the angry look of his brother. My father is a stubborn man, and he may insist that Lord Stark take the black. If my lord father is ward in the north, then he will keep the peace between the north and the throne, but my brother and I will not. The Iron Throne must deal with both Stannis and Renly Baratheon. Your father's army will be trapped in the Riverlands unless he makes peace. What will he do when the Baratheons attack King's Landing? Robb asked. Tyrion winced. You make a good point, my lord. Very well, I promise to speak to my father. I will urge him to free Lord Stark with peace between the North and the Iron Throne. Tell Lord Tywin that I believe it would be a wiser choice as well. There are more battles to be fought, and the return of Lord Stark and his daughter is a fair price. Sir Kevan said, My father does not listen well, but he is eager to get Jaime back. He will be delighted to see me, and I will be happy to ask how much he knew of my plans from Shae. May I also ask for my squire and my good companion to be returned? Tyrion said, buttering some dark bread. You ask for a great deal. Your sellsword hired the murderer, Robb snapped. Only on my orders, and I owe the man. In fact, if you dragged me in front of the lords, I would have demanded a trial by combat with Bronn as my champion. Tyrion said, That would be foolish. You push your luck too far, Jon said. Bronn won a trial in the Eyrie, Tyrion said, because Lady Arryn is a fool. I would allow you to choose him as a champion, and then I would break both of his arms. He would fight poorly. Jon said. The impa looked incredulous, but Jon continued. Trial by combat protects highborns. Bronn is not one, and he confessed to these crimes. Your little trick would not help you escape justice. You may have your squire and sworn sword, but there had best be no more plots or silly tricks. I want my father and sister back. I want them back soon, Robb said. That night, in the great hall of Riverrun, Tyrion admitted to his crimes. He pledged that he would speak to his father about Ned Stark's return as head of House Stark. Jon watched, but Roose Bolton's face remained cold and silent, giving nothing away. Ramsay Dustin could not be found, and his men had also disappeared. On the final day of the tourney, Dacy Mormont defeated Ser Davin Lannister and Ser Harris Harlaw to emerge as a champion. The last bout was an epic contest, and Dacy's holy water sprinkler had held up well against nightfall. She gave the crown of red and white roses to Lady Maeg and her two sisters, a great relief to Robb, who had feared that he would be crowned King of Love and Beauty. Peace reigned in the next few days. Merchants and showmen packed up to return west and south. Garland Tyrell and Owen Fossaway said farewell and extended an invitation for Jon to visit Highgarden and Cider Hall. Even Harris Harlaw paid his regards to Robb Stark for the entertaining 3 days before he returned to his ship. Sparrowhawk. After the visitors left, Jon fired up the forge and continued to produce steel armor and weapons. That made the shock of the Raven even greater. It had come not from Harrenhal or Haraway, but rather King's Landing. Jon was working outside at the hot blast furnace, checking new swords. When the Raven arrived, he ignored it until he heard the mournful howl of a dire wolf. Jon and Ghost rushed to Grey Wind's side. When he entered the Solar, Jon saw grim Brynden Tully consoling a crying Catelyn Stark. Robb's face was solemn and cold as he handed Jon the missive. Ghost marched over to his littermate. Jon read the letter. By order of the Crown, Eddard Stark has been found guilty of treason and beheaded before the Great Sept of Baelor. House Stark is ordered to come to King's Landing to bend the knee. Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. The brothers stared at each other, communicating without words. The two direwolves, Ghost and Grey Wind, stood next to their masters, teeth bared in silent snarls and eyes dark and hard. The commanders of the North and the Riverlands gathered hastily in the great hall. Lady Catelyn, her voice firm despite the streaks of tears on her face, read aloud the Raven. At the high table, Jon sat at his brother's right hand, with the Blackfish and Edmure Tully on both sides. The lords and ladies listened as Lady Stark's voice filled the hall, but when she finished, pandemonium broke out. We cannot serve this Lion King. Joffrey must be a bastard. Why else would he kill Ned? The Iron Throne has gone mad. Lord Bolton's soft voice cut through the crowd. Lord Stark, do you think that Lord Tywin ordered this? As revenge for capturing Tyrion and Jaime Lannister. Tyrion Lannister would have just arrived at Haraway with our message. Tywin Lannister wants Section 8 back, and my Lord Father was his most valuable hostage. I believe these were the orders of Cersei and Joffrey. Robb replied. Joffrey the Ill-Born. son of the Kingslayer and his sister. A Serwyn knight cried. The North cannot serve a lion bastard. I say we break away from the Iron Throne. Rickard Karstart cried. But who do we support, Stannis or Renly? Voices murmured in the crowd. The Great Jon stood up, all 7 feet of him, his hands pointing to Robb. My lords, I don't want to swear to any stag or lion. I saw we have a king and his name is Stark. There is the only king that has my oath. A boisterous cry broke out. King in the North! King in the North! Jon slammed his hand on the table and stood up. No, we did not come south for Robb to become king. We came for one reason only, to bring my father and sisters home. House Stark does not want to become kings. We want revenge for the injustice done to my father. Confusion reigned in the crowd. But the Iron Throne. Robb stood then in motion with his hand for silence, his blue eyes glaring and his voice icy. My brother Jon is right. Joffrey will pay for his crimes. My lords, you swore oaths to my father, to Lord Eddard Stark. Now he has been murdered by a boy king. Are you loyal? Will you be true to your vows? We will fight in my father's name and hurl Joffrey off the Iron Throne. Robert Glover spoke. But Lord Robb, which king will we follow? Robb looked to Jon, who nodded in silent agreement. We will follow anyone who gives us justice. Whoever brings us Joffrey's head will have our swords, Robb said. I do not care if it is Renly or Stannis or a Targaryen prince. The boy king orders me to come to King's Landing. I will come, but not to kneel. I will come for Joffrey with fire and sword, in Ned Stark's name. There was no banging of tankards or pledges with naked swords or oaths of fealty. For the young wolf and the white wolf, all that remained was a cold and terrible anger. They did not care about ancient titles or the crown of winter. Only justice and vengeance mattered. The camp buzzed with activity when Tyrion returned that afternoon. Armored guards stood stiffly around in every direction, hands on spears and looking outwards. He could count at least a dozen boys attempting to look alert instead of frightened outside the large crimson tent, emblazoned with golden lions. That was a very bad sign. The presence of so many squires meant their lords were meeting with his father. No sane bannerman wanted to spend much time with Tywin Lannister. The old lion's temper had never been good, and the Northmen had not done anything to improve that. Tyrion passed through the tent flap to see a dozen commanders, most looking like they wanted to be elsewhere. Only Adam Marbrand and Gregor Clegane returned his father's furious gaze. Tyrion Lannister clutched a letter in his hand, and Tyrion was glad that he was not the bearer of that particular message. Tyrion cleared his throat. Father, I have a proposal from Robb Stark. In exchange for Lord Stark and his sister, he will offer. He stopped when the letter was thrown down for all to read. The room was silent as he read the news of Ned Stark's execution. The North will be most angered to hear this. Harris Swift said, the chinless man clasping his pale, effeminate hands together. He looked like a rich beggar. Yes, thank you for that sound piece of reasoning. Adam Marbrand said, Tyrion, it is good to see that you are safe. My lord, we must make certain the king does not kill other hostages. Else Robert Brax said, get out. Tywin Lannister did not raise his voice, but the aura of menace was clear. Tyrion turned to leave with the other lords and knights before his father called him back. Not you. As he left, Adam Marbrand whispered to Tyrion, the raven only came a few hours ago. The news has been spreading through the camp. Tyrion nodded. In one stroke, his nephew had made certain the war would be long and bloody. He waddled up to the table and sat next to his father. To his great surprise, Tywin poured him a glass of water. How is Jaime? Tywin said. They are treating him well. He is held in a tower with Uncle Kevin, Willem, and 2 of Aunt Gemma's boys, and tightly guarded. Robb Stark and Jon Snow would have traded him for Ned Stark, but they insisted their father remain Lord of Winterfell and not take the Black. But I do not know what will happen now since there is no exchange possible, Tyrion said. Tywin gnashed his teeth. The boy is an utter fool and half mad. Did my sister know about this? Tyrion asked. Cersei claims that the plan was to send Ned Stark to the Wall after he admitted to treason and took back any claims of bastardry, but Joffrey called for his head and she was too weak to stop him. Too weak to control a 13-year-old boy, and now Ned Stark is dead, Tywin said. I would rather have Ned Stark leading the armies of the North than his 2 sons, Tyrion said. 2 sons? Only Robb Stark is trueborn. The bastard is a danger. He constructed a new furnace that produces a large amount of high-quality steel. He built the bridge over the Trident, and according to the whispers of the phrase, ordered it destroyed, Tyrion said. A danger to you. He locked you and your men in an iron cage, Tywin snorted. Did you know of my plans, that my life might be in danger if they failed? Tyrion asked. Your silly plot did fail, and as for your men, the money you pay them comes from me. But you are not dead, which shows the Stark boys are smarter than Joffrey. Tywin wrapped a mailed fist tightly around his goblet. Tyrion wondered if his father imagined that neck belonged to Joffrey or to his sister. I would have accepted their offer and freed Ned Stark to return north, so long as Myrcella was betrothed to Robb Stark. Tyrion nearly spat out his water. Why would you do that? My sister would not agree. Then she is a fool. Her grandchildren would rule the north, and if the heir to Winterfell married Myrcella, the Starks would have to accept her children on the Iron Throne. His father thought only of power and legacy. The happiness of children or grandchildren had never mattered. Joffrey might not agree. He has no love for the Starks, and he is the king, Tyrion warned. Tywin sneered to show what he thought of the king's opinion. Who is our most dangerous enemy? Tyrion stopped to think. His father would only ask the question if the answer was obvious to him, but unclear for everyone else. Stannis Baratheon, he guessed. A look of approval flashed so quickly in Tywin's eyes that Tyrion wondered whether he imagined it. Stannis is a greater danger than all our other enemies combined. What would happen if he married Shireen Baratheon to Robb Stark? The girl is but 10 years of age, and she has grayscale. Would the Starks not wonder whether she can bear a child? Tyrion asked. She is the same age as Myrcella, if people believe these lies regarding Cersei and Jaime. The girl is the crown princess. Her hand in marriage is worth a great deal. If Robb Stark married Shireen Baratheon, and they found a match in one of the daughters with Robb and Arryn, then it would be Robert's rebellion all over again, a Baratheon usurper allied with the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale. Tyrion finished. You are not as much of a fool as you look. We would lose just like the Targaryens. It is fortunate that Stannis is too short-sighted to make such an alliance, Tywin said, or he cares a tiny bit about the happiness of his only daughter, Tyrion thought. What did you see of the Tullys? Is there any animosity between them and the Starks? Tywin asked. Hoster Tully is practically dead. The man never left the castle for the tourney and looked old and ill even at the feast. As for Edmure and Brynden, they have accepted Robb as one of theirs. Sarah Brynden is one of Robb Stark's closest military advisors. Tywin scowled. That is not good. The Blackfish is a seasoned commander. He fought well in the War of the Ninepenny Kings and Robert's Rebellion. If the young wolf trusts him, then the boy has a good head for war. Both boys have heads for war. I spoke to Jaime and Kevin. They were taken by complete surprise on the battlefield. There are whispers that the battle plans were devised by both the young wolf and the white wolf. And before you even ask, the two are loyal to each other. They were raised as Starks, Tyrion said. The Starks may cling to their honor, but there are others who do not. We may yet defeat them with ravens and promises to their men. Tywin said. Tyrion understood his father's words. Every great house had issues with their bannermen, but not everyone could point to the reigns of Castamere as the price of disloyalty. Still, he wondered if his father misjudged their enemies. I'm not certain if Jon Snow cares much about honor. He threatened to chop off a man's cock with a morning star to force a confession. He stuffed me in a cage to die. He does not behave like Ned Stark at all. The bastard is a wolf, and his actions achieved his goals. You are still alive. His threats forced you to admit to the plot in front of the Northern Lords, and to argue for Ned Stark's freedom. Still, lions are more feared than wolves. Tywin said dismissively, That might be true, but a dire wolf was entirely different. Jon Snow reminded Tyrion of Tywin Lannister. The boy might be 10 and 6, but there was a hardness to him, and a strong, almost fanatical devotion to family. Tyrion underestimated the bastard, and that almost cost him his head. He still could not fathom how Snow knew of the murder so quickly. His father spoke then of King's Landing, ruling as the Hand, and reigning in his sister, his nephew, and the small council by force if needed. That suited Tyrion for more than the battlefield. Leaving Shae behind was no great burden. In the city there would be wine, food, and plenty of whores. He would not have to worry about being stuffed into a gibbet, starved to death, or having his cock chopped off. With the failure of his mission thanks to Joffrey, Tyrion wanted to be as far away from the Riverlands as possible. Let his father deal with the wolves. He left as Lord Lannister began to write ravens to Casterly Rock, the Golden Tooth, and Ashmark. On the day after the news, Robb called a morning meeting in the Solar for all the lords and commanders of the North and the Riverlands. Even ladies who did not swing spiked maces attended. In looks, Robb Stark had always favored his Tully side, broad shoulders, deep blue eyes, and thick, lustrous red-brown hair. That morning he appeared more like a Stark, somber and austere with the hard eyes of a man used to cold winters. Jon stood at his side, and both Ghost and Grey Wind eyed the large crowd with a vigilance bordering on distrust. After the announcement of Ned Stark's execution, Robb and Jon disappeared into the Godswood, so small that it was more a bright and airy garden than the grim, shadowy forest of Winterfell. There, in front of a slender and young weirwood tree, and with only their dire wolves as guards, they sparred with blunted swords, wailing at each other with great force. There was no jesting or pretense, but a fierce desire to honor their father's death and unleash their fury in battle. Robb was stronger and more skilled at the attack, but Jon was quicker, and he caught his brother several times on a counter. When they emerged hours later, bruised and battered to the dismay of Robb's honor guard, the two brothers had decided on their course of action. There was no time for grief or apprehension. In another life, Jon and Robb might have hacked at trees with their swords, or prayed to the old gods for justice. There was a better path now, to cripple the Lannister army and force Joffrey to choke on fire and ashes. There were no tales of Ned Stark wailing or whinging when he heard of Brandon and Lord Rickard's death by fire. Their Lord Father called his banners and marched south to make alliances and topple the Iron Throne. They would follow that path or die trying. In their duel, Jon and Robb had mourned their father's death. Now it was time for work. When the door to the packed room closed, Robb stood up next to Jon. "My lords and ladies, there is more news to share. The North and the River are not alone in our battle. Renly Baratheon is to marry Margaery Tyrell. He means to crown himself king," Robb said. The crowd gained life as they considered this development. "Lord Robb, how did we know of this?" Theon Greyjoy asked. "Jon discovered it at the tourney. He believes that most men of the Stormlands would follow their Lord Paramount over Stannis Baratheon. That with the Tyrell swords and the houses of the Reach would give him an army of 70,000, perhaps even more," Rhodes said. "Then he will win the Iron Throne. How can such a vast force be defeated?" Stevron Frey said. "They are still Southering weaklings. They will fold against Northern steel," the Great Jon declared. The Umbers were not known for their diplomacy. "I do not mean to fight the Reach. The North will pledge fealty to anyone who brings us Joffrey's head. But we do not know much about this Renly Baratheon. Will he treat with his brother Stannis? Is he a man the North can follow with honor? And can he smash the Lannisters?" Cheers greeted Robb's last words. The young wolf held up his hands for quiet. "That is why I intend to ride to Bitterbridge to speak with Renly and see if he will give us swords and men to liberate the Riverlands. And in my absence, my brother Jon will command the armies of the North and the Riverlands," Robb said. Jon would have chuckled at the outrage on Lady Stark's face if it had not been such a serious matter, and if he wasn't watching the Boltons and the Karstarks. Catelyn Stark disliked him, but Winterfell men would follow Robb's orders. The same could not be said for the other northern lords. There was some shock, but Roose Bolton hid his feelings well, and Rickard Karstark only had a mood of disgust, not a full-throated objection. Robb's honor guard, though, seemed perfectly fine with the turn of events. The younger Karstarks, Muljon and Wendell Manderly. "Robb, you cannot expect lords and knights to follow up," Lady Stark began. "He is my blood. My lords and knights, you swore allegiance to Ned Stark. My father has always said that Jon may not have his name, but he has his blood. We are the two oldest sons of Lord Stark, and I expect you to follow him, as you would me or any Lord Stark," Roach said sternly, daring any man to object. Jon was proud of his brother. Only 2 moons ago, Robb had been as uncertain as any green boy marching to war. Now, even uncrowned, his bearing was as regal as any ancient king of winter. "My lord, we accept that you may have to speak with this King Renly, but how do we know if your brother will follow your orders? We would not want any confusion or misunderstandings in your absence," Roose Bolton said in a whispery voice. My lords, my brother and I have discussed our battle plans extensively, and he has my trust. Together, we have decided on how to attack the Lannister army. Jon. Robb said, stepping away so that the full attention of the room fell upon the bastard of Winterfell. The Lannister army has plagued the Riverlands for the 2 moons, but in their attacks they have revealed their hand. I have spoken to many who have suffered these raids, and there is a pattern. Lady Smallwood described the attack on Acorn Hall, Jon said. Revella Smallwood recovered quickly from her surprise. Acorn Hall is a small keep, but with strong stone curtain walls, we could not stop the bandits from burning the fields and driving off all the livestock. Lord Derry, what did they attack besides the castle in your lands? Jon asked. The 9-year-old boy blinked. The maester says they sacked our storehouses of grain and stole thousands of wheels of cheese. Lord Piper, when the Mountain attacked Pink Maiden, what did he carry off? They attacked our baggage train. They burnt the castle and lands, and they dragged off many of the wagons. We lost a great deal of dried meat and fish. Clement Piper replied, What does it matter what they took, Snow? It is gone now, Thane said. Food. They are taking food. But that happens often in war, the Blackfish said. Tywin Lannister sent out these men not just to rape and burn, but to forage. Jon nodded to Chet and Jerry, and the 2 boys brought out a map of the Riverlands. The 3 forks of the Trident were clearly marked with a large white dot for the Lannister army at Harroway. On the sides of the map, the borders were drawn in red. The Crown Lands, the Vale, the North, the Westerlands, and the Reach. Tywin Lannister has a large army that requires a lot of supplies. Sorry, Steffron, are the lands near the crossing fertile? The old gray-haired man shook his head. Some, near the Trident, there are some farms, but the lands further east are rocky. The King's Road carries men, and the Green Fork carries trade and supplies. Few people live far away from the river, and the Lannisters would find more forests and rocky hills. Our army has broken the siege of River Run, and this castle sits on the river road that links Lannisport to the crossroads. We can shut off all supplies from the west. The Reach has declared for Rensley. They will not ship food north to the Lannisters. As for the Vale, Jon said, My niece has shut the Vale of Arryn down entirely. The bloody gate is closed tighter than a whore's cunt after you lose your purse, the Blackfish said. There were gasps of outrage from a few ladies present, but many men in the room nodded. They understood exactly the predicament described. Right, so Tywin Lannister cannot get food from the north, the west, the south, or the east. He has 30,000 men and 10,000 horse. What will they eat? Jon said. They still have the Crown Lands. Duskendale, Rosie, Stokeworth. There are many farms there, Lord Moden said. Yes, but the Crown Lands also have another issue. King's Landing, the city has 500,000 people, and they are fed by the Reach, the Storm Lands, and the Crown Lands. My lords, I submit that the war will expand beyond the Riverlands. As soon as Renly declares, the Tyrells will not send any more food. The Baratheons will shut down both the Storm Lands and the Crown Lands near Dragonstone, and Tywin Lannister will need supplies desperately. Anything he takes from the Rosie and Stokeworth cannot feed the throne, Jon said. You want us to starve him out, to weaken the Lannister by destroying his access to food supplies, the Blackfish said. But what will happen to the people in the Riverlands? If the Lannisters starve, they will as well, Edmure Tully said. Small folk always suffer in war. Hungry men are easier to kill. This is a good strategy. Tywin Lannister may have Harrenhal, but no army does well without food. Brynden Tully said, I understand your concerns, Lord Edmure, but there is another target. House Lannister prides himself in having the best, most well-equipped army. We saw that at the Whispering Woods when the Lannister knights rode Destriers and Chargers. These are large horses, formidable in battle, but they eat a great deal more than a regular steed. A Destrier might eat 25 pounds of grain a day. Tywin Lannister has 10,000 horses. He needs over 200,000 pounds of grain a day for his cavalry alone. Jon said, What does that matter, Snow? He could just turn his horses out on the fields. They can eat grass and go into the forest, God said. Snow is right. I saw this in Essos during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. You can let your horses forage, but then they become vulnerable to theft and being killed. Mesli's the monstrous hired hundreds of Dothraki and Tyroshi bandits. When our horses grazed in the open, they would steal horses and mules. It was a giant pain in the ass. The Blackfish said. Is it chivalrous to attack animals? The young Lymandary asked. This is war, Lord Darry. We will do two things. Lord Stark will ride south to Bitterbridge. We will send men to clear the way down and kill any Lancers we find on the way to Highheart, Acorn Hall, and the Stony Septon. From north to Seaguard and south to the Gold Road, we will control that entire line, and nothing will come from the Westerlands to Tywin's men. And next we will deploy men east on the River Road. Lord Bolton and Lord Karstark, I want every Lancer forager killed. I want Tywin's army to be shut off from any forage in these lands. The Bloody Mummers, the Mountains men, if they show their heads, they will lose them, Jon said. My Outriders will help as well. The scouts will look for any horses across the Trident or any bands of sellswords or Lannister men. If we find their supply lines, we can mount hit-and-run attacks, the Blackfish said. Hunger will win our battles more easily than swords, Jon said. I intend to ride to Bitterbridge this evening. It will take me a few days to get there. I will return in a moon's time, and that the Lannister forces will be weakened so we may attack. Robb said. Lord Stark, Tywin Lannister is not the only one who needs to worry about food. We also have tens of thousands of men and 5,000 horse. What of our supplies? Our army cannot stay here for many moons without greater stores, Rose Bolton asked. We share your concern, Lord Bolton. I will speak to the Reach, and I trust Jon to make other plans as well. Robb said, as his brother nodded. There was a great deal to do that morning. Besides the forge and the dungeons, Jon spoke to several lords and their most trusted commanders. Between River Run and the Gold Road, there were 3 places that would serve as natural points to housemen and supplies. Acorn Hall, Pink Maiden, and Stony Septu. Acorn Hall and Pink Maiden were castles of House Smallwood and House Piper. Stony Sept was a walled town just north of the border with the Reach. It was pledged to Wayfarer's Rest, but the Vances left it alone. Several knights, like a cadet branch of the Osgreys, held small holdfasts near the town. With the assistance of the Blackfish, Jon assigned the Hornwoods, the Foresters, and the Glovers to work with eager Riverlords to drive out any Lannister men south of River Run. The key was ensuring that the Northmen and the Riverlords could coordinate and communicate. Jon ordered that a grid of posts be formed, where men on fast horses could ride from one castle to the next to alert of any enemy soldiers. Ravens could fly only from castle to castle. Having dedicated messengers, even if they were boys or squires, would ensure that no Lannister foragers escaped detection. With the Outriders and better lines of communication, the raiders would no longer have the element of surprise, and instead face ambushes and harassment. Jon kept his ability to ward into ravens and wolves a secret. Besides Robb, only the Blackfish and the 3 Blackwood sons knew. There were whispers, of course, and Northmen muttered about ancient tales of skin-changers like Gavin Greywolf, the Ward King, who had been slain by a Stark King of Winter in the Age of Heroes. Jon went to see Robb as his brother prepared to depart. Robb chose to travel late, taking 6 men at arms and the same number of his battle guard. Many had wanted to come, but he chose a mixture of rivermen. Patrick Mallister, Olyvar Frey, and Lucas Blackwood, and Northmen. Robin Flint, Donal Locke, and Owen Norrie. Catelyn Stark had insisted on going as well, and she chose a few Winterfell stalwarts. More importantly, Grey Wind would watch over Robb. Jon trusted the dire wolves more than any man. He had warned Robb to be suspicious of anyone the dire wolves disliked. He waited until the Tullys left the Solar before entering. Admiral Tully might be the next Lord Paramount of the Trident, but even the Rivermen looked more to Jon Snow for guidance in military matters. The young wolf's acumen at war was unquestioned, and he had chosen the White Wolf as his proxy in those matters. Jon entered to see his brother in deep thought. Grey Wind looked bored, though. Jon took a pitcher and poured 2 fresh goblets of watered wine. "What are you pondering?" he asked. His brother looked up with a small frown. "If I was king in the north, I could legitimize you. You would be a Stark," Robb said. Jon sat down. "I am sure Lady Stark would be even happier about that. We don't need our bannermen to hear of any disagreements in House Stark." Robb snorted. "Our bannermen want to win battles. If I die, you must lead the north. Bran cannot lead the army. A young crippled boy will not inspire men to follow. Robb, you won't die. The only danger you face is to overeat at a Tyrell feast." Don't indulge in too much roast swan or sit on top of a pigeon pie, and you will be fine. You are in more danger of getting betrothed to a red-cheeked fossaway or perhaps a red wine. John J. Do they really have pies with live pigeons? What would happen if the birds pooped in the pie? Rob asked, momentarily diverted. John shuddered. I don't know, but give me a roast chicken or rack of deer instead. Don't you want to be a Stark? Rob said. Aye, more than anything in the world. Let them say that Ned Stark fathered 4 sons, not 3. But that can wait until after the war. We win or we die, and we must win first, Jon said. Rob nodded before switching to matters of the war. Theon has asked again to return to Pike, as his only son. He believes he can convince Balon Greyjoy to ally with us. He says the Ironborn could take Lannisport or even Casterly Rock. The Ironborn pillaged Lannisport, but they could not keep it. And the war is not on the Sunset Sea. Our battles will be fought on the Trident, the Gold Road, or the Crossroads. The Lannister fleet may have burned 10 years ago, but Tywin Lannister will have learned his lesson. I doubt it will go the way Theon believes, Jon said. What do you mean? Rob asked. The Iron Fleet attacked Lannisport with surprise, but the Westermen know that they will have reinforced their defenses, so the Greyjoys may look elsewhere to reeve. They may attack the Shield Islands, or the Arbor, or even go to Deepwood Mountain, Jon said. Deepwood Motta? There is little of worth to plunder there. Do the Ironborn want oats and logs? Rob asked. I have never quite understood the Ironborn. Instead of trading, they choose to raid and plunder. Bear Island is dirt poor, and yet they still send ships 1,000 miles north to attack. Balon Greyjoy is a proud, stubborn man. He may still wish for revenge against the North, Jon said. Then you do not think Theon can convince him to attack the Lions? Rob asked. Theon has not seen his father for 10 years. If I returned home from the Citadel as a master and asked Lord Stark to attack another lord, would he listen? And our father was far more reasonable than Balon Greyjoy, Jon said. Aye, I will tell Theon that he cannot go. But there is another matter to speak about. I believe that we must take the battle west. The Lannister lands are fertile and rich. With so many men in the Riverlands and King's Landing, the army could forage there, Rob said. That was true, but Jon worried that their forces would be stretched too thin. I will venture west, but my goal is both supplies and to force Tywin to come battle us on our ground, not his. We do not need to go all the way to the Crag or Case. We need men in the Riverlands to bleed the Lannister army, Jon said. The more we weaken the heavy cavalry, the better. The Lannister army is built around the charge. We won at the Whispering Wood because their horses did not have enough space. We won at River Run because they had no more horses. It is likely that the Old Lion has even more knights and a much stronger force than the Kingslayer, Rob said. For the next moon, you need not worry. Your only concern will be bowing and curtsying to the ladies of the Reach. Perhaps Grey Wind will fall in love with the Rose of Highgarden, and you will duel Renly Baratheon for Lady Marjorie's hand, Jon said. Watch it, Snow, or I might marry you off to the Rosens or the Red Wines for a bushel of apples or a barrel of arbor gold, Rob said. The Fossaways have the apple orchards, Rob. The Rohans just have lots of trees. Although I suppose you should get what you can for a bastard's hand. I would be happy as Lord of the Hightower, Jon said with a smile. The two brothers grinned and joked as they walked to where a crowd waited. The men-at-arms and Rob's guard were already mounted. Catelyn Stark sat on her horse with a look of disdain. But Jon did not let that bother him. The pipers, Dances, and Glovers would dispatch a small part of their forces today to accompany Robb Stark on the ride to Acorn Hall. A much larger group would ride in the next day, with orders to begin scouring the countryside and setting up the system of messengers Jon devised. The Ravens will go out today? Robb asked. Hoster has the birds ready. By this time tomorrow, the castles in the Reach and the Crownlands will hear your announcement, Jon said. Robb nodded. Good fortune, Snow. I will see you in a moon's time. Hopefully the Reach Maidens will not have stolen you away, Jon replied. The two dire wolves nudged each other, and Go stayed at his master's side as his littermate, Grey Wind, trotted off into the distance. Robb relaxed as the great oaken keep of Acorn Hall rose in the distance. The castle was not that small but lacked a moat and had only a modest courtyard. Lord Diakomar had ridden next to him for much of the journey, prattling on about the history of House Smallwood. Grey Wind liked the young Lady Ravella better, but both the husband and wife seemed solid and reliable nobles caught in a feud between the Lannisters and the Starks. An old man in a brown robes with a patch of 6 brown acorns placed upside down on a yellow field rushed out with a stable boy and a houseguard. "My lord, a raven has arrived from Riverrun." Smallwood handed over the unread letter from the panting maester. Robb opened Jon's letter, calling Joffrey an ill-born bastard, and declaring that Lord Robb Stark, Warden of the North, pledged the swords of the North and the Riverlands to any who would remove the wretch from the throne and avenge Eddard Stark. The blunt missive would be the talk of the 7 kingdoms in the days to come, just as the 2 brothers planned. "My lord, will you do us the honor of being our guest for the evening?" Theomar Smallwood asked. The man was more than a little tedious, but the ride was long and Robb wanted to inspect the nearby lands. "That would please me, but I do not wish to tax your stores in such a time. Only a light supper, and no feasting." "Lady Smallwood, would you show me where the bandits raided? I would speak to those who suffered, and offer any possible aid." Robb said, "Certainly, Lord Stark. I thank you for your kindness," the lady said. "There is nothing to thank, my lady. My father visited his small folk and believed that they should not suffer from the games of the highborn. I only do the same." Robb replied. He returned a few hours later, angry again at the Lannisters' callous disregard for the lives of others. The wanton destruction, the rapes, the mindless cruelty. If anyone ever deserved to die screaming, it was the Mountain and his men. At dinner, Robb sat next to the Lord Theomar and his lady mother to Lady Ravella. There were other lords at the table, an unctuous Rebel Glover, a Vance cousin from Atranta, and a hungry Clement Piper. The meal was simple but filling: mutton and mushrooms, fresh brown bread, peas pudding, and onion stew washed down with ale. Lord Smallwood attempted to give him the best of each dish, but Robb insisted that Lady Smallwood and Lady Stark have the first taste. They finished with a wheel of yellow cheese before the servants cleared the plates away. Robb gave thanks to his host before he turned in for the night, instructing his men to rise early the next morning. He left the hall with Grey Wind at his side, and Catelyn trailing him. Robb. He sighed. He did not look forward to this conversation. "Yes, mother. You have not stopped scowling the entire ride from Riverrun. You cannot give the bastard such authority. He already is too well regarded in the North and even in the Riverlands. He may usurp your position and cast Rickon and Bran aside." "What a family and duty," Catelyn said. "Jon is my family, and my duty is to the men who have followed me south. They placed their lives in my hands, and I will not send them to their deaths because highborns and septas look down on bastards. I may die or be injured in battle. If so, Jon is the best leader for House Stark and the North. Far better than Bran. Everyone can see that," Robb said. "Sweetling, I hope you never feel the cruelty of losing a child. Bran is crippled. Ordier is lost, and Sansa held as prisoner by Joffrey. I do not wish you to be in danger. Can you not put an end to this terrible war?" she said. "I do not wish to die, but this is war. Boys younger than me have fallen in battle. We must avenge father's death. House Stark will not let our lord be slain with impunity." Robb answered, "Robb, 100 Whispering Woods will not bring Ned back to me. And what if Joffrey kills your sister Sansa, or they discover Arya and murder her? Will you deprive me of my daughters?" Lady Catelyn said, "I know you are suffering, mother, and I am sorry for it. But my father did not shirk from this path. When his brother Brandon and Lord Rickard Karstark were slain, he marched south. What if Ned Stark treated with Rhaegar Targaryen and was pardoned by the crown? How would the North view their warden if the rebellion ended in a truce with a Targaryen still on the throne?" Robb said. "He would be alive, and that is nothing to scoff at," she said. "Alive, but disgraced. A king's mercy is a poisoned gift. I will not allow Joffrey and the Lannisters to spare my life and take away my hopes, dreams, and honor. The Lannisters killed my father and crippled my brother. Only death can pay for life," Robb said. He wrapped his arms around her and ignored Lady Stark's tears. "I will try not to die, but in war, nothing is certain. We may win, we may lose. But I know this is to be true. Jon is loyal. If I fall, he will defend our kin." Jon stopped himself from strumming his fingers on the table. At sunrise, Chet handed to him a sealed paper, and that was of far greater import than this meeting. Still, Jon had declared that commanders meet mid-morning to hear of any critical developments. He would rather the lords be briefed quickly than rely on rumors and gossip, and he had dispatched Ghost west. The Great White Wolf was his most reliable ally, and bonded deeply to his master. The dire wolves were a gift of the old gods to House Stark. His thoughts drifted back to the meeting when he heard the words of the Bracken representative. "And we have taken back Stonehenge." Lord Bracken, with the assistance of the Corstarks and the Vances, thrashed the remaining Lannister stragglers. Jon was not sure the name of the boy who spoke. There is a Hendry Bracken and a Harry Rivers. Both had the thick shoulders, coarse brown hair, and burly build of their blustery father, Jonas Bracken. "And did we suffer many losses in liberating your home?" Jon asked politely. "No, Sarah. We outnumbered them, and the sight of the many North banners caused them to flee east. We have posted lookouts on the hills near the castle," the Bracken boy said. Stonehenge was half the distance between River Run and Harroway, sitting only a few miles south of the River Road and the Red Fork. Lord Bracken has done yeoman's work in securing the castle, Jon said to the pleased Bracken and the displeased Blackwoods. In truth, the praise was overstated, given the substantial reinforcements provided, but the stronghold was critical to controlling the River Road. That road and the Trident would determine any battle. "Master, your raven came this morning from Stony Sept," Hoster Blackwood said. "It is from Lord Stark, and it says that their travels have been safe. The Rivermen, with the help of the Glovers and the Flints, are quickly securing those areas." "Did Robb say anything about the Gold Road?" Jon asked. The Gold Road marked the border between the Reach and the Riverlands before climbing north as it terminated in Lannisport. "No, Master Snow, but he would not cross for a few hours more," Hoster replied. "Send ravens to the Pipers and any loyal knights in Stony Sept. They should watch the Gold Road carefully to make sure no troops or supplies move." Jon said to the boy's nod. "Brynden Tully's men are also in position. They have begun to raid and poach horses," Brynden Blackwood said. "Steal horses? Fa, when will we fight, Snow? We need to take the battle to Tywin." "I say we send long ships down the Trident to attack Harroway." Fionn Greyjoy said, "We don't have long ships, and even if we did, the Lannister scouts would see them coming miles away." Jon did not need to mention that the Northmen were not trained to fight from ships. Only the Flints of Widow's Watch and the Manderleys had any skills at sailing. Not if we sailed at night and attacked at dawn. If we took them by surprise, we could burn their wagons and kill many men. Theoren insisted. "Always thinking like an Ironborn," Patrick Mollister sneered. "That doesn't make it a bad plan, but we do not have the ships," Jon said. "Why are we staying behind stone walls, sitting on our arses? We should be out fighting, putting castles to the torch." Theon cried, "We are fighting, Greyjoy? The Pipers and the Vances are clearing the south. We are moving men east to control the River Road. We need to prepare the battleground first, and the only castle to put to the torch would be Harrenhal. Good luck on that. The walls are incredibly thick, and much of the castle has already burned," Jon said. When the meeting ended, Jon was stopped by Edmure. The Tully heir had recovered physically from his imprisonment, but no longer smiled and japed. Then again, his father was rattling on the deathbed, rambling about events and people long ago. "Do you think he is right, Snow, that we should be out in the field?" he asked. Edmure wanted to know if he should be fighting, Jon thought. Restoring the good name of the Tullys was clearly top on his mind. There is a time to sow and a time to reap. "We are not ready yet to bring the battle to the main Lannister host," Jon said. "I need to do something to prove myself." "They whisper that I lost River Run," Edmure said. "You did lose River Run," Jon replied. "Am I to bear that shame for the rest of my days?" he cried. "Denying the truth is pointless. You lost one battle, but there is still a war to fight. River Run is enormously valuable as a command center, as a defense point, and as a symbol to the Rivermen that the Lannisters have not won." Jon said, "I would like to contribute something besides my place of birth," Edmure said. "Then wait for the right moment. Charging into battle like a berserker sounds exciting. But raiding is not war. The Ironborn cannot hold land. You care much about your small folk. Fighting over their fields, back and forth, will only increase their misery. Better to strike once and bring down the lions for good," Jon said. "I am not a wolf, but I want revenge on the Lannisters just as much as you," Edmure said. "And you will have it, Sir, but you must wait," Jon said. That afternoon, Jon sat in a small room near the Ravenry, sealed away from prying eyes. Robb had taken the River Run solar for his own, but Jon was not the grandson of Lord Tully. Besides, the solar was a poor place to hide. Jon reached out for Ghost, and his mind left his body for his bonded wolf. The river road became rocky as it entered hill country. The air turned crisp and cool as the mountains loomed before him. Ghost's sharp eyes could see the blue and gold flag of the Tooth fluttering in the wind. The castle was small but stood stoutly on the mountains, the circular towers commanding views of any who approached. Ghost sniffed a familiar smell. Goats. A herd of goats passed through recently, but the scent dipped down, and away from the castle were these wild goats. Or had a shepherd wished to avoid the seat of House Lyford? He heard a knock on the door and voices outside. He was not sure how vulnerable his human body was when he warged. He stood up and opened the door. Geryon was quarreling with Arisha, much to Satin's dismay. "Argue in the room, not outside where others can hear," Jon said, motioning for the three to sit. Jerry marched in with his head raised high, as proud as any boy of 10 and 2 could be. He started immediately. "I want to join you when you leave Riverrun." Jon raised his eyebrows. He had given several orders in the last few hours, but nothing that would have clearly betrayed his plans. "Jerry, you are too young to go to war. Too many have died already," Aisha said. "I want to fight for you, Mother, to get revenge for what the Lannisters did. Let me prove that I am brave, like my father before he died." Jerry's words struck his mother dumb, and Yaxa could only weep. Satin sat uncomfortably at her side. Jon wondered if Jerry read much of The Dance of Dragons. Joffrey Valeron had said nearly the same words to Queen Rhaenyra after his 2 brothers had been slain. He had offered to fly his dragon in battle against his enemies. He had died at the age of 10 and 3. "Why do you think I will leave the castle?" Jon asked. "The forge is no longer making plate armor and swords. The orders have changed to spear shafts and axe handles with long spikes," Jerry said. "Swords are good in close battle, but against a cavalry, a shield wall of spears and halberds works better. But it will take weeks to produce enough weapons," Jon said. "The guard has been changed around the keep. The Mormonts have been replaced, and you would not order that unless you move the prisoners," Jerry said. "Yaeming and Kevin Lannister are staying at Riverrun, and as for the Mormonts, they have been guarding prisoners for several weeks. I trust Winterfell and Tully men also," Jon said. "Satin told me you asked him to pack some of your supplies for healing," Jerry said brazenly. "Jerry, that was a secret," Satin hissed. "You should have led with that. You are right. I am on the move, and you missed the most significant clue. Ghost is no longer at the Maiden Vault or by my side. You do not need to leave the castle. There is much you can for the war at Riverrun. Satin will oversee the forge. Hoster Blackwood will work with the Ravens. You do not need to come with me," Jon said. "Maester Snow, I want to fight. Let me join the Wintertown boys. I am certain you will ask them to accompany you," Jerry said. "Not all of them, but Chet and Clytus will. And yes, in battle I will need as many helping hands as possible." Jon turned to Aiche. "I will try to keep him safe. You will stay by my side or in the shadows. I am careful with my men." "Thank you, my lord," Jerry said with glee, holding his mother's hand. Jon shook his head. "Nothing in war is certain, and you are too eager for battle. These are your first orders." Jon handed Satin and Jerry a list of names. "Gather these people. Tell them I wish to meet in the solar when the sun sets." Jon waited until they assembled to speak. These were the men and women that he trusted most. Lady Mormont and her daughters, Eddard Karstark, who had pledged his axe, Small John Umber, the Manderley brothers, and the Cranogman. At the last minute, he had written Edmure Tully's name. If Hoster died, Edmure would be Lord of Riverrun. He or his uncle Brynden would need to know the plans, and the Blackfish was far east, raiding behind the Lannister lines. "My lords and ladies, we have news. Tywin Lannister has begun training fresh recruits in the Westerlands," Jon said. He had received a message from Reynard that Sir Melwyn Sarsfield pressed him to train with a new Lannister army. "How many, Maester Snow?" Magazine Mormon asked. "I do not know the number, but it makes sense. Tywin may have heard rumors of the Tyrells declaring for Renly. His army is larger than ours, but he will want to replenish the losses suffered at Riverrun. He may also need to defend his borders against the Reach," Jon said. So do we prepare defenses and watch for an attack from the west? Tywin means to attack us on two fronts. Then, Wylus Manderly asked. We won't allow that. We will bring the war to them when the recruits are still green and poorly trained. There may be a way to cross into the Westerlands and avoid the Tooth. Have your men ready to leave tomorrow. A smaller, quicker force would be better, Jon said. You mean to attack with stealth? Maggie asked. Jon nodded. Most of the Karstarks have headed west, but I have 100 loyal men at arms still at River Run. Eddard said, the small Jon could bring twice that number, and the Manderlys pledged the bulk of their troops. Their combined numbers were too small, but he wanted to move quickly without alerting the enemy. Where are the Lannister forces gathering? Daisy asked. A small village called Oxcross, only 50 miles from the Tooth, Jon said. Robb slowed down the horses when they saw the ancient stone bridge that crossed the Mander River. After crossing the Gold Road, they followed the Rose Road down to the Reach. Even from a distance, he could make out thousands of tents and the telltale signs of siege weapons, the long wooden arms and buckets sticking out like a sore thumb. They could not see the castle, but as they drew closer to Bitterbridge, they encountered many wagons on the road carrying merchants, victuals, and entertainers. A troop of dwarven mummers made rude remarks as Robb and his men passed on the road. Should we announce our arrival? There is an inn nearby. We could ask for messengers or send your squire to Rensley, Catelyn asked. No, I want to approach them first, Robb said. If you would like to rest, mother, you can. Robb set forth with the 6 members of his battle guard. Early in the trip, they had hidden any signs of their houses. Grey Wind was an obvious hint. But the dire wolf tracked his master at a distance, the smoke-gray fur blending into the deepening shadows. The town was alive with people, hundreds of small folk. They were lost in the dozens of great pavilions, bearing the sigils of the Reach and the Stormlands. The splendor of the proceedings dwarfed the games at River Run, and everywhere, Robb saw the banner for Renly Baratheon, a rampant stag in Tyrell colors of gold and green. He hasn't posted any guards, Robb said. Surprised, they had wandered the grounds undisturbed for half an hour, marveling at the number of houses present. The Tyrell sigil was most prominent that there were blazons for House Rowan, Tarly, Curran, Tarth, Penrose, Fossaway, Estermont, Hightower, and dozens more. I see at least 10,000 tents, and that does not count men in the castle, and peasant levies sleeping outside in the fair weather, Patrick Mollister said. Still, a small force could easily ambush and kill hundreds. They might not get to Rensley, but they could get away in this chaos. Robb mused. They came at last to a clearing where a handsome man in green and gold was seated next to a slender and comely girl with soft brown hair and large brown eyes. Judging from the crown on the man's head, these must be Renly Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. The would-be king wore a diadem with antlers of gold and a splendid, almost garish set of golden armor. Robb was struck more by the 5 knights guarding Renly. They bore striped silk cloaks with different colors. The raiment was pretty, he supposed, but quite useless in battle. 2 figures fought in the middle of the ring in front of the king and queen. The first was quick and nimble, with roses festooning his helm and even more flowers on his cloak. The breastplate of the silver armor was a riot of colors, sapphire, green, gold, and black. The other was much taller, wearing dark gray steel plate and bearing a heavy sword. The 2 were well matched, with quickness offset by size and strength. Finally, the giant warrior got close enough to tackle the other. Once the 2 warriors were on the ground, the result was plain to all. The flower knight, Loras Tyrell, yielded. The tall warrior doffed off the steel great helm. It was a woman with short, brittle, straw-colored hair, a wide mouth, and a nose that had been broken before. Brienne of Tarth looked like a cross between Daisy Mormont and Small John Umber, Robb thought. But there was no doubt that she was a capable warrior. She asked for a place in the Rainbow Guard, a request granted readily by Renly, who dubbed her Brienne the Blue and handed her a striped silk cloak. Robb would have left, but a tall, broad-shouldered man walked over to the queen and pointed a finger in his direction. He wondered if Garland Tyrell had recognized him or whether it is one of the other Reach Knights at the tourney. 2 others, the stand, scrutinized him carefully. A dark brown-haired man with a crippled leg and very small old woman with white hair. They wore expensive cloths of green and gold. Robb strode forth, the 6 men of the North and the Riverlands following closely. Brienne and Loras turned and unsheathed their swords. Sir Garland spoke quickly to the king, and Renly signaled a lackey who rushed forward. Halt, You stand in the presence of Reimagined of House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhaenyra, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm, Master of Storm's End. The men blared. The crowd was silent until Aldevar Frey was pushed ahead by Lucas Blackwood. His squire cleared his throat and said, "This is Robb Stark. He is the young wolf." The Valyrian steel dagger glittered next to the candles on the oak table, the distinctive rippled patterns a mark of the superior quality of the plain blade. The black dragon bone hilt had no guard but a bright red ruby in the center and notches for a better grip. "This is why we are at war with the Lannisters," Robb said to the intense curiosity of all in the chamber. Lord Lawrence Caswell, a wispy young man with a bowl cut and a weak, pinched face, had given the best rooms of the castle to the would-be king. Wrynsley retreated from the tourney to Bitterbridge, with the Tyrells to meet with the Northmen privately. He had graciously offered to house Robb and his men in the small keep, but Robb declined and asked only to send his squire to alert his lady mother. After Catelyn Stark arrived out of breath, the men from the Reach and the Stormlands gathered in the Solar. Rosalie Baratheon took the Lord's chair with his dainty wife and fat good father seated next to him. Rosiel and his mother were given chairs opposite Wrynsley, and offered silver platters of melons, fire plums, pomegranates, and blood oranges. There were other Tyras there, a smiling Garland, a suspicious Loras, and a quiet Willas, who stood with a cane. Willas, the heir of Highgarden, supported his grandmother, a wizened lady with white hair and sharp eyes. All the Tyras wore green velvet trimmed with sable, and a gold mantle over green. There were a few other nobles in the room, a lean, balding man in mail with a short, bristly gray beard, a genial salt and pepper-haired man with a green apple on his doublet, and a stout, clean-shaven man in the colors of white and gold. Lord Caswell was nowhere to be seen. Robb continued. "My brother Brandon was pushed out of a window. He was crippled because he saw the Kingslayer fornicating with Cersei, and then Joffrey Baratheon hired an assassin to kill him. We found it in Bran's room after his wolf killed the man. We heard that Lady Stark accused Tyrion Lannister of the crime, and that the Impa was declared innocent in a trial by combat at the Eyrie." Olenna Tyrell said to Catelyn's embarrassment, "My brother Jon believes that Joffrey is guilty. When Lady Stark brought the dagger to King's Landing, Petyr Baelish told her that Tyrion Lannister won the dagger from him on a bet. We believe he was lying," Robb said. "We do not know whether Petyr was telling the truth or not." Catelyn said cautiously. Rosalie picked up the Valyrian dagger and examined it carefully. "He lied. Robert won this blade from Baelish during the tourney on Joffrey's 12th name day. I told my brother to bet on Loras Tyrell in the joust. Loras defeated Jaime Lannister in the final tilt, much to Tywin's displeasure. But why would Petyr lie?" Catelyn said, her face pale. "Baelish is a whoremonger, and a man who clearly uses tricks to steal crowns from the Iron Throne." "Why would he not lie?" Olenna said. "Who cares about this, Baelish?" "Lord Stark, have you come to swear yourself to our grace, King Renly?" Mace Tyrell asked pompously. "The North has made its position clear. We will pledge loyalty to anyone who gives us justice," Robb said, "and you shall have it. We march to King's Landing. A new day will dawn, where honor and justice will reign in the Seven Kingdoms." Renly said. Robb had seen no signs of any marching from the vast army at Bitterbridge, who seemed more than happy to enjoy the tourney and sit on their arses. "How long will that take?" "We expect to be there in 4 to 5 months' time," Mace said cheerfully. "Traveling from the Reach to King's Landing would normally take less than a month. A fast horse might do it in 2 weeks. Robb wondered if Wrynsley planned to feast at every town on the Rose Road. Why not attack Tywin's Lannister instead? Defeat him and the Iron Throne falls. And how do you expect to defeat Tywin? Harrenhal is a strong castle with thick walls and tall towers. We would lose thousands of men in any attempt." The unpleasant, balding man said. "You must forgive Lord Tarley, but he is a blunt man and focused on war." Rosalie chuckled. "The North is also focused on war. We have been fighting actual battles." Robb paused before announcing his plan. "The Reach shares a border with the Westerlands. Send your men to attack from the south. We will attack from the east. Together we can crush the Lannisters." "But how would that defeat Lord Tywin? He is in the Riverlands," a befuddled mess said. Garland tried to not roll his eyes. "If the Westerlands are sacked, Tywin has no choice. He will never let Casterly Rock fall. Lord Stark means to ambush him when he returns west. It is a good idea, Teddy said begrudgingly. The west is stretched too thin, and Tywin Lannister could have to cross River Run or head far south to return. Your Grace, I believe the Stark plan has merit. I would be happy to lead such a raid. The speaker was a stout man in a white doublet with a tree stitched in gold thread. That was the sigil of the Rosens of Golden Grove, one of the most powerful families in the Reach. I am the Master of War. I should lead the invasion, Randyll Tarly shouted. And I am the Master of Law. Golden Grove is closest to the Westerlands. My men are familiar with the land and can strike at Crakehall and Silverhill in 2 days' ride, Rowan replied firmly. Let us not squabble. As Hand of the King, I forbid it, Meek said, oblivious to Tarly's venomous glare. Lord Stark, the army is already set on our path. We march northeast on the Rose Road, so all of the Reach and the Stormlands can see our splendor. You can have your splendor, but if you diverted 10,000 swords and horses, you would have the Westerlands, long before your parade reached King's Landing. Robb said, My boy, it is imperative that our army stays united. In the Battle of Ashford, where I defeated Robert Baratheon, it was the size of the Tyrell host that forced the rebels to flee. Mace droned. Robb marveled at how dense the Lord of Highgarden was. After the Battle of Ashford, the army of the Reach marched to Storm's End, where they were useless for the rest of the war. Had the Tyrells engaged Robert for longer, Targaryen loyalists could have separated the men of the Stormlands from the army of the North and the Vale. The rebellion would have failed. A small force can defeat a larger one with speed and surprise, Robb said. Mace chortled, the rolls of fat on his neck jiggling. And what examples do you have of such a thing? In my experience with war, Robb interrupted Lord Taxlerell. I captured the Kingslayer at the Whispering Wood, I broke the siege at River Run, and I won with a broken bridge. In every battle, the North had less men. Your Grace, I believe we should consider Lord Stark's plan, Mathis Rowan said, ignoring Tarly's stony gaze. Your Grace, the small council will meet tonight. As your hand, I will discuss the issue with your loyal and steadfast advisors. Mates, very good, my Lord Hand. I trust you will inform me after your discussion. Lord Stark, if you swear fealty, there may be a place for you on the council, Ryansley said, smiling. Robb could not think of anything he wanted less. Robb stood on the ancient stone bridge, overlooking the Mander River. Night had fallen and the stands were empty, with the men supping in the castle walls. Robb was astounded that the Wrench and his lords was not concerned with the task of feeding 50,000 mouths for the 4-month march to King's Landing. Jon had been concerned about the state of supplies at River Run for an army half that size. The Reach, watered by the immense river Mander and its many tributaries, was blessed with fertile soil, but so were the Riverlands. Bitterbridge had earned the name for immense bloodshed near this small town. 9,000 poor fellows had been slaughtered by the forces of Magar the Cruel, making the Mander run red for dozens of miles. Small folk in boiled leather, armed with sharpened sticks and wood axes, faced knights in steel. Robb had no great sympathy for the faith militant, but it was a plain massacre, and there had been more senseless killings in Bitterbridge. A mob murdered a 3-year-old Targaryen prince in the Dance of the Dragons. In retaliation, his uncle burnt the entire town down with dragon fire. The scorch marks could still be seen on the stone bridge. Will you join us for dinner, Lord Robb? Marjorie Tyrell said. She wore a pale green samite gown under a darker green cloak of white flowers made of seed pearls. Robb was painfully aware of her bare shoulders and her slender neck. Her grandmother stood in the background, a frown on her old pursed lips. Her dress was equally fine, but her wrinkled skin was thankfully covered. Are you spying on our army? The Queen of Thorns demanded. No, my lady. As for spying, I will leave that up to Ser Garland. Robb jested. I am looking for Grey Wind, my dire wolf. He disappeared when we walked about the tourney ground. Even in the Reach, we have heard much about the dire wolves. They say your beasts can tear out the throats of men and horses alike, Margaery said. They are not beasts. Grey Wind is my companion, and he is no danger to anyone who means me no harm. His packmate Ghost is the same, Robb said. I mean no offense, my lord. In truth, I sought you out, Marjorie said shyly. I thought your plan intriguing, but Rangeley wishes to hear the opinions of his advisors. My father spends much time assembling a small council. I hope you do not take offense. You need not worry, my lady. Rob replied, even as he thought Rensley odd for being a stag drowning in roses. He turned to Lyanna. And did you seek me out as well? The old lady snorted. I am here to prevent you from despoiling my granddaughter. Grandmother, Marguerite said in shock. Go stop with the outrage. We have heard stories of Northmen, savages who steal women away at the blink of an eye. Cregan Stark demanded a Blackwood wife and a Targaryen princess for his family, else he would make war on the south, Olenna said. Alicent Blackwood chose to go north, and I would not steal a married woman. Robb said, My father taught his children to behave with honor. Yes, the noble Eddard Stark. Tell me, what is your goal down south? What do you mean to do with the Iron Throne? Olenna said sharply, Pardon, my lady. Robb felt like he had missed something important. When the rebellion ended, 3 men could have claimed the throne. Robert Baratheon, Jon Arryn, and your father. Jon Arryn was no warrior and already old. Ned Stark arrived first at King's Landing. Had your father wanted, he could have sat on the Iron Throne. Baratheon would have been fine with getting drunk and whoring himself into an early grave. You would be the crown prince. Do you regret that? Olenna asked. Lady Olenna, my father was a good man. Honorable, just, loyal to his friends, and brave against his enemies. If I ruled the north half as well as he did, I would be pleased. My lord father never desired a crown. He was content as the Stark in Winterfell, Robb said. The old lady exchanged a look with her granddaughter. You are certainly too honest for the south, my lord. Here, we must smile and jape and say words that we do not mean. I am too old in such follies. Olenna said, You must forgive my grandmother. She worries about my royal husband. Marguerite threaded her arm through his as they walked on the bridge. Olenna and her 2 giant guards followed, and Robb noticed that the old lady did not use a cane. She thinks that even with an army as vast and gallant as the Reach and the Stormlands, Rosie was overconfident. Any army can be defeated. Victory in war is not determined by courage or numbers. The Kingslayer's men were no less brave than mine, but they still died. Battle is not won at the feast hall or the tourney grounds, despite the boasts of men, Robb said. Who commands your troops, Robb? Now that you are here in the Reach, the Blackfish, or one of your bannermen? Marjorie asked. My brother, Jon Snow. He leads the North and the Rivermen in my name, Robb said. I am sure your brother is good and kind. But what of your bannermen? Do they complain that he is your father's natural son? Marjorie asked. You can say the word bastard, Robb said, amused. My bannermen can grouse as they wish, but I am Lord of Winterfell. I have a duty to my men to lead them through danger. I trust no one more than Jon in this regard. Men die in war, but he will not squander lives without reason. The North does not have the numbers and wealth of the Reach. A lean smoke, gray direwolf bounded on the bridge, followed by a dark-haired, dark-eyed woman in a simple gray dress. She was pretty but long of face, and her skin, between the white of the Reach and the olive of Dorne, she looked at Greywind with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Is that your wolf, Sarah? She asked. Greywind, Robb scolded. He leaned over and took a roll of cloth from the wolf's jaws. The linen had been torn in several pieces and coated with drool. I am sorry, my lady. I am no lady, merely a healer, she said, as she placed the cloth into her duskin bag. Marguerite Tyrell was more comely and had a sweeter smile, but there was an airy and vibrancy to this darker-skinned girl. Robb could see specks of blood and dirt on her hands, and he wondered if that had been from the jousts or the melee at the tourney. You certainly are a lady. This is Lady Talisa Megger. She is a noble woman from Volantis, who was refused admittance by the Citadel. Archmaster Adro says that she is a truly gifted healer, Marguerite said. He said, I had adequate knowledge of medicine for a beginner. But Meister Ambrose would have taken me on as an apprentice had the Conclave not protested. He did not care that I was a woman, but I thank your grace for the kind words. Talisa smiled at Marjorie. I am Robb Stark, Lord of, he said. I could tell, my lord. Who else would have a dire wolf? Talisa snarked. Greywind's ears pricked up, and he approached Talisa again. She stood her ground, only holding her bag too high for his curious nose. My brother, Jon. He is a skilled healer. After the Whispering Wood, he healed dozens of men in a single night, Robb said. One man alone? Talisa asked skeptically. Aye, he healed both our men and Lannister knights. Jon studied at the Citadel. Mayhap you would care to meet him. Robb said. Mayhap I will, Talisa said. Neither Grey Wind nor Robb saw the small smile on Margaery's face as the Tayrails walked back to the castle. The sun had barely risen when Jon led the forces from Riverrun. It was a small host, only a few thousand on horses. Even though the men and women were mounted, many were not true cavalry. Some were skirmishers armed with javelins and spears, others rode to combat, but then dismounted to fight. The Manderly forces included more heavily armored lancers, but the older Manderly brother would follow in the next few days with reinforcements. Jon was rushing to the border to rejoin Ghost. The dire wolf discovered a goat track that wound down a narrow gorge into open country. It was crooked and windy, but looked wide enough to ride single file. If they could pass without the notice of the Golden Tooth, then Jon would launch a morning raid. Otherwise, they would wait for greater forces before they attacked, to defend their flanks. That morning, Jon rode next to the surprisingly garrulous Stiffron Frey. Despite vows of secrecy by those attending the meeting, the Riverlanders had ferreted out the expedition west. Lady Mormont advised taking on a small number now and having the rest march with Wylis. The Riverlanders were eager to redeem themselves, and the Battle of the Camps only whetted their appetite for glory. Even there, with the exception of the Blackwoods and a few Frey knights, the Rivermen had only been charged with mopping up the stragglers. Ned Stark taught his sons that a good lord needed to know his men. On the march from Winterfell, Robb had done that, speaking with a different lord every morning and afternoon, lending his ears and a ready smile. Neither his father nor Robb had to deal with a fray, Jon thought sourly. Stavron may have been more tolerable than Ryman or Hustine, fortunately absent from the ride, but he still prattled on about squires, betrothals, and greater ties between House Frey and the North. Master Snow, I hope my grandchildren will be fostered at Winterfell, Stepharon said. Jon grimaced, thinking of Edwin, a thick-witted fool, and Blackwalder, who was even worse. I cannot speak for my brother Robb on this matter, Jon said. It must be a great joy being fostered in the North. Winterfell is said to be a fine castle. There are other places in the North that your descendants can be fostered at. My Lord Father considered Bear Island for my sister, Ariae, to foster with the Mormonts, Jon said. Bear Island, isn't that place rather poor? Stipheron exclaimed. It is rich in bears, Jon chuckled. Bear Island does not have to be poor. It has timber, but they have only fishing boats because the presence of the Ironborn discourages trade. And how would you change that? The Ironborn will not move from their rocks, Stepharon said. Shipbuilding. You could build ships and sail them down to Blazewater Bay and up the Fever River to Moat Island. Then you could transport them to White Harbor. There is a great demand for ships in Braavos. More ships in White Harbor means greater trade with Essos, Jon said. But Moat Island is 100 miles away from the Narrow Sea. How could you move a ship over land, sir? Stipheron asked. I could build a canal. The neck already has water and swamps. You could cut a path through there wide and deep enough for a single ship to be pulled to the bight. House Mormont could sell ships to White Harbor and the Three Sisters. You can even take those ships and explore the Shivering Sea. Bear Island could become as rich as White Harbor, Jon said. A startled Stipheron gasped and excused himself. Jon chortled when he saw the elderly Frey Knight catching up to Lady Maegis. Why is that weasel talking to Mama Bear? Jory demanded. He wants his grandsons to be fostered at Bear Island. No doubt, he means to get a betrothal with a lovely Mormont lady. Jon jabbed to an outraged Lyra and Jari. Well, if he sends one of these big, little, or medium Walders to Bear Island, we will send him fishing on the frozen shore. The boy will get eaten by wildlings, Lyra said. Sir Stipheron is not so bad. He may be greedy and care too much about his blood, but he is far better than Blackwalder and some of the other sons. Daisy said. Snow, some of the men are wondering how you plan to cross the Tooth. They wonder if you will cast a spell to darken the sky or use glamours to disguise us as Westermen. Jory said, if I wanted the sky to darken, I would just wait for the sun to set. I know how to cross the Tooth. I am more concerned about other things, Jon said. Like what? Avoiding the Rivermen and the Freys, Daisy said. Jon shook his head. He would live up to his responsibilities as Robb's proxy, even if it meant speaking to Freys, Goodbrooks, Charltons, and Rygers. Jerry, bring the parchment over. The boy handed Jon a crude drawing with castles, rivers, and mountains. A large black axe marked the village of Oxcross. This is a map of the Westerlands, besides the Golden Tooth and Silver Hill to the south. Every major settlement is closer to the Sunset Sea than the border with the Riverlands. So why Oxcross? Most knights live in castles on the water. Most small folk live near Lannisport. Why should they train at this small village? Jon said. They have to train far away from the cities, Jerry said. Jon raised his eyebrow. And why is that? Because if the Lannisters are forcing people into the army, they can't be near Lannisport. The small folk would just run away, Jerry said. The Mormonts were shocked. Even in the north, there were deserters, but they were few and swiftly beheaded as cravens. Correct, Jerry. Stafford Lannister is recruiting for a new army, so he needs to find a place far away from cities and castles. But he chose a village only 40 miles away from the Tooth. Why? Jon asked. The Tooth is closest to the Riverlands. He can march from Oxcross to Riverrun, Lyra said. Jon shook his head. The new army is green. It will be weeks, maybe even months before they are ready. Oxcross is 40 miles away. On horseback, he could be there in 2 hours. Stafford Lannister must be visiting the Tooth far enough that the small folk could not run, but close enough for a knight with fresh horses. Jerry thought out loud. Correct again? There is something at the Golden Tooth. Something important, Jon said. Initially, he had thought of food stores, but Stafford Lannister was not in charge of supplies for the Lannister army. That was Leo Lefford's responsibility. Snow, you mean to attack the Golden Tooth? You are not just going after this camp at Oxcross, but it is a strong castle with commanding views. Even a small garrison can repel large armies. You will not be able to take it by surprise, Daisy said. If I am right, I won't need surprise to crack the Tooth. Jon smiled grimly. Robb had never feasted so well or been so utterly bored. If kingship was measured by the splendor of victuals and raiments, Rensley would surpass Aegon the Conqueror and Jacaerys the Conciliator combined. For every dinner, the Taqueries had venison, roast boar, and honey cakes baked with blackberries and nuts, washed down by a golden vintage of the best arbor wine. At this rate, Rensley would be fatter than the late Robert Baratheon, or even worse, Mace. Robb found the Tyrells an odd mixture of gallantry and greed. There was a lot of pretty words, fancy etiquette, and complex table settings at meals. But there was little action. He was not sure whether the fault lied with the bickering small council or directly with Rensley Baratheon. There were 3 Tyrells on the small council: Mace, Hand of the King, Loras, Lord Commander of the Rainbow Guard, and Willis, Master of Ships. But there were 4 other lords: Eldon Estermont, Mathis Rowan, Jon Fossaway, and Randyll Tarly. The small council could not agree on the invasion of the Westerlands. Many thought Robb's idea sound, but Mace Tyrell did not want either Tarly, Rowan, or Fossaway to take the glory of any success. On several nights, Robb sat next to Talisa at dinner. Robb was no fool. The healer was pretty and capable, with a kind heart. Not many noble women would give up comfortable lives of dances and masquerades to work on the battlefield. He was intrigued by the dark-haired lady from Volantis, but Robb was well aware that Margaery favored this match, and Robb could not see why. Perhaps Lady Margaery owed some loyalty to the Tyrells. She did not strike him as a spy, but then Jon said the best spies hide in plain sight. Robb sighed as he took a bite of the freshly baked lemon tart served with the cheese plate. It was too sweet, like many things in the Reach. He had neither the patience nor the skill for these palace intrigues. He preferred to ride in battle or to hunt in the woods with Grey Wolf. Even losing in Sivas by Jon would be better. At least then, they could drink some good northern ale afterwards. Jon complimented Robb's tactical skills, but said he was shit at long-term strategy. Unfortunately, getting allies was more of the second. Perhaps your sisters will visit the Reach, Lord Stark. Willis would be happy to host them at Highgarden. Mace Tyrell said. The heir to Highgarden raised his eyebrows. Father, I believe we need to rescue them from King's Landing first. Did you see my sisters at the capital, Your Grace? Robb asked. I saw your sisters at a tourney, but not more than that. They were staying in the Tower of the Hand, Rensley said. And when you fled the capital, did you offer to take them, or help Lord Stark send them to safety? Robb asked, ignoring his mother's imploring gaze. Rosier Lee put down his silver dessert spoon. Your father certainly planned to send Lady Arya and Sansa to safety, but I do not know what went wrong. When he told me he would confront the Queen, I warned them that the Lannisters had far more men. I told him to seize the royal children that night. If he held the children, particularly Joffrey, he would have held the throne. But you still fled King's Landing, Robb said in an accusing tone. I would have been locked into the black cells with your father. I had 100 Baratheon men, and your father had less than 24 guards. The Lannisters had at least 300 red cloaks. And there was the City Watch. The gold cloaks go where the gold is, and the Lannisters could outbid both our houses. I could not have saved your father or your sisters. I would only have lost my head. Renly said, Your Grace, why did Lord Stark not accept your offer? Mathis Rowan asked. Renly shrugged. Ned Stark was stubborn. Perhaps his vaunted honor. Honor has its costs. My husband would not wish any harm done to innocent children, Catelyn said stiffly. Joffrey is no innocent, and my father would not let any harm done to Tommen or Myrcella. Seizing the three would have saved his life. Robb snapped. The door burst open, and an old man stooped with time walked in with a missive. Your Grace, an important message. Rosierly smiled at the Maester, as if nothing could disturb him. I am sure it can wait after dinner, Maester Lomas. I do not think it can, Your Grace. It is a very urgent matter, the man said. The younger Tyrells were the first to react. Willa sent the servants away, and Ser Garland gave orders to the Master of the Guard and Captain-at-Arms to bar the doors. The Rainbow Guard gathered closer, with Ser Loras and Ser Robar with swords unsheathed. With a nod from Olenna, Yellory Tyrell ushered the other ladies of the Reach out of the room. Only Margaery, her grandmother, and Catelyn stayed. Robb decided that unless asked, he would not leave. A frowning Redyadly read the letter, his face turning purple. Damn him, Redyad said. What has happened? Mace shouted. Robb would have chuckled, but it was a serious matter. Rosierly handed the letter over to Margaery. She scanned it swiftly. Stannis Baratheon has sailed to Storm's End. He is besieging the castle with over 5,000 men. This must be answered fiercely. Lord Randyll, how much cavalry do we have that could ride out in a week's time? Randy said, 7,500. Our light cavalry would be best. In the Stormlands, we could recruit another 5,000 to 10,000 men to our cause. Taxley said, We go, then, to break the siege. I will ride at the front to defeat my foolish brother, Renly said. House Tyrell will be the first to support you, Your Grace. Mace sprayed. As will your other Leo lords, Your Grace, Mathis Rowan added. Other bannermen rose to pledge their fealty from all areas of the Reach. The Stormlanders were slower to rise. This is the most idiotic idea I have ever heard. Robb said, What? How dare you? Mace sputtered. How far away is Storm's End from Bitterbridge? 600 miles. You would charge ahead with your cavalry to engage Stannis. If you killed your horses, you might get there in 10 days, with no supplies, no infantry, no catapults, and no archers. You would be exhausted and fighting an enemy that has had weeks to prepare, Robb said. The lords and knights looked around sheepishly as the angry reaction to the letter faded. Also, Stannis is besieging Storm's End. Have you all forgotten the rebellion? 50,000 men surrounded a garrison of less than 1,000, and the castle still stood after a year. Let Stannis break his army against those walls, Robb continued. But it is the seat of House Baratheon. I cannot let it fall, Renly cried. There is a better chance that I sack Casterly Rock than Stannis takes Storm's End, and my men are 400 miles from the rock, Robb said. The amicable gray-haired man with red and green apples on his doublet spoke. Your Grace, Lord Stark, is correct. We had an enormous host when we besieged Stannis at Storm's End. We could not break the castle. A very old man with a dark green sea turtle on his tabard stood up slowly. Sir Courtney Penrose is the Castellan. He's a good man and no fool. He can certainly hold Storm's End for months. Robb rubbed his chin in thought. Stanny sailed to Storm's End. He will not have much stores or supplies. His men will have a hard time feeding themselves, let alone succeed at a siege on a castle with 150 feet walls. If you do not rush, hunger may destroy his forces. The room quieted down, with many eyes on Robb. The Lords of the Reach were a querulous crowd, but they were impressed by the plain talk of the young wolf. Lord Stark, what counsel would you give? Renly said. Call for a parley. half the distance between Bitterbridge and Storm's End. Bring your Rainbow Guard and your lords. Make Stannis see reason. Your host is far greater than his, and you both want Joffrey off the throne. Any battle between your two forces only helps the Lannisters and results in the needless death of Stormlanders. If you do not fall into this trap, Stannis has no option but to retreat, Robb said. Your Grace, I believe you could make common cause with your brother. Why fight when you have a common enemy? Lady Stark said. An uncomfortable expression passed over Rainsley's face, but the youngest Baratheon smoothed it over with a forced smile. Your words are sensible, Lord Stark. Mace Tyrell let out a sigh of relief, the fat, bearded face satisfied that the king had decided and that he would not be blamed for any misstep. I will have ravens sent out at once, Your Grace, and I will personally select loyal men and knights to accompany you. No army of Stannis will be able to trap you. You have my word. House Tyrell and our bannermen are loyal to you. Robb ignored the babbling warden of the south and the curious gazes of the other lords and ladies, and Margaery Tyrell in particular. Robb's singular focus was the war in the Riverlands. He and Jon had decided that the best strategy was to capture, weaken, or kill Tyrell and Addister by any means possible. Robb rode to Bitterbridge to open a second front against the Westerlands from the south. But with Renly Baratheon now focused on this phantom threat in the Stormlands, the north was unlikely to get swords and spears from the Reach. Jon had been awake for an hour already when the sun rose. Ghost rested at his side, the White Wolf eager to start the day. Jon had sent a night swift into the twilight to scout. The dark grayish-brown bird blazed through the sky on long swept-back wings, finding the Lannister camp with ease. The night swift's sharp eyes saw many sigils, the golden lion on crimson and many different combinations of lions and boars, as well as the prancing purple unicorn. Jon could smell thousands of horses and the last bits of smoke from the embers of burnt-out fires. There were no sentries posted, and the camp was dead asleep. A few squires made their way around, rousing the leaders. They relieved the guards who tried to catch a few winks after overnight patrols. Jerry and Chet led others in feeding the horses with fresh water and grain. The rest of the Wintertown boys began to pack, taking down tents and preparing a breakfast of reheated bread and porridge. The commanders assembled a small distance from the road, trees and hills offering concealment from the sun and the eyes of the Golden Tooth. 300 yards further, and the army would be visible to watchers on the castle walls. Sarstefron, flanked by Blackwalder, Perwyn, and Walton Frey, pushed his way to the front, where Lady Mormont, Eddard Karstark, and the small Jon already stood. The crowd of knights and nobles from the north and the Riverlands waited for Jon to speak. We stand at the border. The Golden Tooth lies beyond that hill. Even now we can turn back, but once we cross, there will be no retreat or negotiation. Once we cross, we ride for Oxcross to bring war to the west. In enemy territory, orders must be followed. Discipline will be maintained at all cost. We have to be silent. No speaking, no questions. How do we cross without the Tooth raising the alarm? How do you intend to ride unseen to Oxcross? We do not have large numbers. We could be trapped by enemies, Blackwalder said. You Frey Craven. Don't you think the Maester has thought of this already? Smaugin yelled. Who are you calling a coward, Umber? Blackwalder snarled, his hand reaching for his sword. Enough, you idiots. They will hear your shouting at the Tooth. Magie Mormont said firmly. I know how to cross. I know where the camp is, 2 miles from the village. And I know how to deal with the Golden Tooth. We attack with speed and surprise, not with large numbers. Ghost will lead us down the defile. We ride single file. Let us seize the moment. Today we will repay the Lannisters for launching the war in the Riverlands, Jon said. The sun was still low in the sky when Ghost's keen nose smelled the Lannisters' horses. Jon raised his hand and the riders stopped in silence on the river road. They had been lucky. Few small folk or merchants were up so early, or on the way eastward. The outriders had spotted nothing suspicious, and there had been no action from the watchtowers at the Tooth. The warriors began to prepare for battle. Heavy cavalry readied spears and lances. Archers knocked bows, and men and women donned helmets and latched shields to their arms. Ghost ran up a ridge overlooking the Lannister forces. Jon warged for a flash, and still there were no guards in the slowly awakening camp. Lister, Jerry, Chet, Dennis, Shane, Jon called out. The four boys rushed forward. The mummer hesitated but stayed next to Jerry. The horses are tethered together. Walk over the hill and pretend to be squires. Cut all the lines so the horses can run, Jon said. And Lister, if anyone asks, you are a Lannister guard, escorting these boys. Betray us, and you will pray for death. Go quickly, lads. Very soon we will charge into the camp. Chet led them over the hill, with Ghost trailing them. Any last orders, Snow? Lady Mormont said. A few boys kindled small fires, while others handed out to horsemen clubs and sticks dipped in pitch. Robb had bought fire and sword to the camps at River Run. Jon would do the same. A successful tactic deserved to be repeated. If you find Stafford Lannister, capture him. Spare the boys and the squires, but kill everyone else, Jon said. What does Stafford Lannister look like? Eddard Karstark asked. He is a blonde cunt with green eyes, Smallgen said. They all are. Seems like all these Westermen have blonde hair, Eddard said. Stafford is older. He has a son who is 26, so he will be in his 40s. I would bet he is resting at the largest pavilion, Jon said. Ghost bared his teeth in a hungry snarl as Stark forces and rivermen prepared to attack. The direwolf bolted down the hill, and in mere moments, the sound of horses stampeding broke out. Jon could taste blood in his mouth as Ghost ripped a horse's belly open. The horses have caught his scent, Jon thought. Even if they could not see Ghost, they would panic. Jon charged, the fighters from the north and the Riverlands following, armed with lances, torches, mace, and swords. It was not a battle, but a rout. Westermen were rushing around in the chaos, attempting to calm the maddened horses when Jon's forces struck. Tents burned and heads rolled as 2,000 horsemen raced through, cutting down any resistance. Boys fled in all directions, some jumping into the river, others dropping any armor or weapons as they dashed west and south, fleeing for their lives. In a blink of an eye, the battle was over. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands, were dead or dying. Others cowered, unable to escape and begging for mercy. There were so many young boys, Jon thought. Stafford Lannister must have raised his recruits from the potshops, wharves, and slums of Lannisport. Jon rode the Garren to the large crimson tent at the center of the camp. Ghost met him, the wolf's fangs dripping blood. The Mormont girls were already there, dragging an old man with thinning yellow hair and a big square chin. There were several other captives in the tent, a lord who had only donned half his black steel armor with 3 golden lion heads before being knocked him senseless, and another man wearing the unicorn of House Brax captured by Jory. Snow, this is Stafford Lannister. He was trying to flee, but Ghost killed his horse, Daisy said. Daisy, call for Lady Mormont and the other lords. We need to meet urgently, Jon said. I need to know our list of captives. Who else is in this camp? Lannister? You will have to kill me first, Stafford shouted. Jon rolled his eyes. I will find out soon enough. Lady Mormont, the small Jon, Eddard Karstark, and Wendell Manderly gathered in the tent, and many of the northern lords looked troubled. How many captives do we have? Jon asked. Thousands, my lord, but they are not. The Smallzion's words were interrupted as several rivermen entered, the Goodbrooks and the Rygers. Where are the others? Where are the Freys and the Charltons? Jon asked. They are busy looting, sir. Blackwalder and his brothers are searching the tents for gold and silver. Lamund Goodbrook said, We have no time for this. Tell them I want them to come immediately to this meeting. If they don't, I will hang them for disobeying my orders, Jon said coldly. After the knight rushed to relay the message, the small Jon continued. Master, we captured thousands, but even more fled on foot. Should we pursue them? Jon shook his head. We do not know the terrain, and many have no doubt run west on the river road. Soon they will raise the alarm in the village of Oxcross. We have no time to waste. Jon noticed the Mormont girls whispering. Why do you look so troubled, Lady Max? It would be easier if we showed you. Lady Mormont beckoned her men. They dragged in a half-dozen prisoners. The first was a blond boy of 10 and 2. The next was perhaps a name-day older. The next boy was even younger. The other 3 prisoners were alike. None were older than 10 and 4. Why are they so young? Jon asked. Maester, they are all like that. The entire camp is full of beardless boys. I do not wish to kill children, Eddard Karstark said. The Mormont soldiers brought in more prisoners. It was the same pattern. Boys who should have been handling horses and polishing armor, not fighting with swords and spears. These men are green, master. Untrained recruits, farm boys with nowhere to go. Lyra captured some fishermen who had been pressed into the army only 3 days ago. Lady Mormont said. The Freys walked into the room. Perwyn Frey helped the hobbling Stifron Frey, while Black Walder looked on angrily. I am sorry, Lord Snow. I took a cut in the shoulder. And then you fell off your horse, Black Walder sneered. At least he was fighting. You were trying to rape the camp followers, Perwyn snapped. Enough! Jon looked at Black Walder with great distaste. We have important business. Were there sell swords or free riders? There may have been some, master. But those ones are probably the first to run. It was the boys who tried to protect the horses and the tents. Wendell Manderly said. Jon peered more closely at one of the taller boys. He was young and lanky with the same green emerald eyes as Jerion. I know you. I saw you at River Run. You were a squire. The boy nodded his head and stared at the ground. Tybolt Marbrod, you swore an oath not to raise arms against the Northmen. Aye, and I will pay the price. I have been captured twice now. Tybolt said bravely. The young boy hid his fear well. He may have been foolish, but he was a brave lad. What a victory. We captured boys so green they are not smart enough to run away. Black Walder jabbed. These are not just young boys. Look at their hands and garb. These are not small folk. This one is a Marbrand. Which houses are you from? Jon asked prisoners. Liddon, Serret, Prester, Farman, Vicary, Broom, Plum. The voices rang out. Jon paced the tent in deep thought. What does this mean, Maester? Eddard Karstark asked. It explains why the camp is at Oxcross. Jon turned to Stafford Lannister. Tell me, how many times have you traveled to the Golden Tooth? And with which houses? The old knight blinked stupidly. But how did you find out? Stafford Lannister truly was a dolt. He had just confirmed Jon's suspicions. Lady Mormont, we have an urgent task, and it must be done immediately. These instructions have to be followed precisely. Jorian Lyra, find Lister, and the Wintertown boys. I need them here now. Dacey, Eddard, Small John, and Wendell. I need the best fighters in our forces. Tell all the men. Prepare to ride, Jon said. Alysienne Leffer drank her cup of tea as the rest of the ladies' room clucked over lemon cakes and fruit tarts. Alice stood out in the breakfast room. She was not as old as the matrons of the Westerlands, but she was quite mature compared to the younger daughters. Her father left her in charge of the Golden Tooth after his departure. She was also more concerned about the war, and she smoothed her long, straight black hair, a vestige of her Blackwood great-grandmother. Her aunts and cousins expected these troublesome Northmen would be beaten with ease, just like the Rivermen. News of Jaime Lannister's capture and disturbing stories of prisoners and Tyrion at River Run had been dismissed as a temporary setbacks. The young wolf had not faced the old lion, and Tywin Lannister, as Sir Stafford tediously noted, had never lost a war. My dear niece, you must think of the future, her Aunt Serena said. And what future is that? Alysium said. Marriage, my dear. You are not getting any younger. My son Ser Davin is close to you in age. Rosier liked the blunt and outspoken knight, but Davin had no lands or keep, and her father claimed that after the war, Tywin would force Sir Tywin to leave the Kingsguard. Casterly Rock was a yeated prize, although she would have to deal with Tywin as good father and Cersei as sister. Both would make her life miserable, and she could not rule the Rock until they died. All things considered, Alysienne would prefer to stay the Lady of the Tooth. We are in a war, Auntie. Before making betrothals, we should wait to see who lives and who dies. The war will be over by the end of the year, James Yervacari said. Once Lyman marches west, with Sir Stafford, these Starks will bend the knee. And when will that be? A plump blonde asked. My boy says that the other recruits are so green they cannot even hold a spear. He says that he and Martin Lannister are the only ones who can charge on a warhorse. Tybolt says the same. Aunt Cassila chimed in. He says the Northern Army would cut through Sir Stafford's recruits like Valyrian steel through a wooden shield. Before the other ladies could chastise her for lack of faith, a page rushed into the room. Lady Lefford, riders spotted at a distance. Sir Stafford is galloping back to the castle. But why would Stafford come this morning? A puzzled Serena asked. He appears to be chased, my lady, the page said out of breath. Alicent dashed to the main gatehouse, her 3 personal guards and Aunt Serena in tow. The Golden Tooth had 3 gates, a battle gate looking west, a hunter's gate where herds of goats and cattle could be driven out to graze, and an east gate to the riverlands. That day, only the drawbridge of the battle gate had been lowered over the dry moat filled with tall and rusted spears staked to the ground. The castellan handed Alicent the mirror spyglass. She could see Stafford's gilded ring mail in the front with blood crusted on the neck and shoulders. Her uncle led several dozen riders, squires and knights. She could see the black steel armor with 3 golden lions of Lord Jastin, the white and red great helm of Ser Lemon Vakari. She hoped for the sake of her aunts and cousins that Tybalt and Martin were in the group and unhurt. But who is chasing them? Alicent wondered aloud. As if in answer, a war horn sounded, a long, low blast that rolled from the west. Another horn answered from a ridge to the south, and then other trumpets joined the dirge. It was a terrible sound, a song of vengeance that promised blood. The horns continued the frightful melody. "Aid is the Northmen, my lady. They have come to kill us all," a guard screamed. "How long does it take to raise the drawbridge?" Alicent asked coolly. "Not long at all, my lady. We could allow Sir Stafford in, and then lower the portcullis. The invaders would be fools to charge while we raised the bridge," the castellan said. "Then do so. I will be there to greet my uncle," Alicent said. "Order the garrison to man the towers, and have meat and drink prepared for them." Alicent waited at the gatehouse. The watchers on the hall could see clouds of dust and horses in pursuit now. Her 2 aunts and several cousins were with her, and 10 guards stood in the passageway, their spears pointed in the direction of the lowered drawbridge. The horses thundered past as 4 dozen riders galloped through the hall, past the murder holes and into safety. "Lower the portcullis," the castellan yelled. Something was wrong. Tybalt's armor was askew, and Lord Vicary carried a greatsword, far longer and broader than his normal arms. Her uncle took off his helmet, only it was no Lannister at all. The hair was sandy blonde, not thin tufts of a man going bald. The eyes were a dull brown, and the man had a sheepish, almost apologetic look. This was not Stafford Lannister. The riders dismounted and drew swords, maces, and spears. The man who pretended to be Lord Vicary was a giant, nearly 7 foot tall, and with great sword in hand, ambushed her guards. The warrior wearing Lord Jacques' armor held the spike of a wicked-looking morning star at the neck of the castellan. Other armed fighters surrounded her, shocked aunts and cousins. Lastly, the figure disguised as Tybalt Marbrand vaulted off his horse and unsheathed his sword. He took off the heavy steel helmet. He was tall and young with a long face, dark brown hair, and gray eyes so dark and cold they looked almost black. He glanced over the crowd of disarmed guards and terrified ladies and saw that they looked in her direction. Alicent Lefford mustered up the remnants of her courage. If she must, she would die with honor. "What is your name, my lady?" he asked. "Alicent Lefford. I am the Lady of the Golden Tooth." "Tell your men to throw down their weapons, raise the portcullis, and surrender," he said. "May I have your name, sir?" Alicent asked. "I am no Sir Jon Snow," he said.